Hey guys, tonight we are traveling back in time not to a battlefield or a royal court, but to a place of profound and almost intimidating quiet. We're going to step into a medieval monastery, specifically into its Scriptorium, the room where knowledge was painstakingly preserved, one letter at a time. This is less of a history lesson and more of a sensory experience, a kind of historical ASMR. We'll be focusing on the quiet, satisfying sounds and the intense discipline of a world without printers, keyboards, or a backspace. Frankly, your modern attention span might not survive the first hour, but we're going to try. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Your support means the world, and I love seeing where you're all tuning in from. So let me know in the comments your city and what time it is for you right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first thing you register is not a sight or a sound, but a feeling. It's the piercing, damp cold that seeps up from the stone floor, right through the thin leather of your sandals and into the bones of your feet. You've been pulled from your straw mattress in the dormitory, in what feels like the dead of night. The darkness outside is absolute. A thick, inky blackness that the moon hasn't bothered to challenge. You are wrapped in a coarse, heavy wool habit, the only barrier between you and the chill of a world without central heating. Then comes the sound. It's not a gentle chime. It's a deep, resonant bong from the bell tower. A sound so forceful it seems to vibrate in your chest cavity. This is the Matins bell, the first of the canonical hours that will slice your day into a rigid schedule of prayer and work. It's not an invitation, it's a command. All around you in the darkness, you hear the soft rustle of other bodies rising, the shuffle of feet on stone. No one speaks. You follow the procession, the line of dark, hooded figures moving through the open-air cloister that borders the courtyard. The air is sharp and clean, carrying the scent of damp earth and distant, sleeping livestock. Your breath looms in front of you, a fleeting ghost in the flickering light of a single tallow lamp carried at the front of the line. Your destination is a heavy oak door. As it swings inward on groaning iron hinges, a different kind of silence greets you. This is the Scriptorium. The room is long and narrow, with high, arched windows that are currently just black voids. The air inside is still and thick with a unique aroma, a mix of old wood, melting wax from the candles, a faint, almost sour smell of animal hide, and something else, the dry, dusty scent of ink and aged paper. It is the smell of words. Slanted wooden desks, cold carols, are arranged in a neat row, positioned to catch the maximum amount of daylight when it finally arrives. For now, their surfaces are cloaked in shadow, save for the workstations of the senior monks, each lit by a single, precious candle. An older brother, Diomarius, the monk in charge of the library and its Scriptorium, guides you to an empty stool with a silent, commanding gesture. His face is a roadmap of wrinkles. His expression neither kind nor cruel, merely focused. Use it. The wood of the stool hardened and forgiving. This is your new world. The silence here is different from the silence of the dormitory or the cloisters. It's a working silence, a silence heavy with concentration. You can almost feel the mental energy in the room, the immense focus required to copy God's word without error. The rule here is absolute quiet. This isn't just a guideline. It's a spiritual discipline. Silence is believed to foster humility and prevent the sin of pride from corrupting the holy work. Of course, this presented a practical problem. How do you ask for more ink, or point out that your neighbor has just skipped a line? This is where a niche bit of monastic life comes in. Many orders developed a surprisingly complex system of sign language. A gesture mimicking a scratching dog might mean you need to borrow a pound spout to fix an oily spot on the vellum. Wiggling your fingers might mean you need a new quill. It was a silent, secret language known only to those within these quiet walls. You sit and watch the master scribes. Their movements are a study in economy. The dip of the quill into the inkhorn, the slight pause to let the excess drip off, the steady, rhythmic scratching as the nib moves across the page. It's mesmerizing, But was the silence truly absolute? Historians still argue about this. Some sources suggest that in certain orders, the low, instructional whisper between a master and an apprentice was permitted. Others describe Scriptorium where even a cough would earn you a stern, silent rebuke. The reality is that the rules likely varied immensely, depending on the monastery, the abbot in charge, and the specific era. The Cistercians, for instance, were known for their extreme austerity and would likely have enforced a stricter silence than their Benedictine brothers. For now, your task is not to write. Your task is to absorb, to feel the cold, to breathe the ancient air, to understand the gravity of this room, as you sit there, shivering slightly. The first, pale gray light of dawn begins to filter through the eastern window. It illuminates a single column of dust motes, dancing in the air like tiny, silent angels. Your journey has begun. The gray light strengthens, turning from a watery wash to pale silver. It slides across the stone floor, inch by inch, until it finally kisses the edge of your simple wooden desk. This is the first lesson of the Scriptorium. Patience. You do not command the light. You wait for it, and as it illuminates the room, the silence seems to deepen, to become more defined. It's no longer just an absence of noise. It's a presence, a heavy blanket woven from the concentration of 24 souls. You can feel its weight on your shoulders. You become acutely aware of your own sounds, the soft thud of your heart against your ribs, the whisper of air in your nostrils, the almost imperceptible creak of the stool as you shift your weight. The Armorius, the silent guardian of this room, rises from his own desk at the front. He moves with a slow, deliberate grace that belies his age, his leather sandals making no sound on the stone. He approaches you, and you instinctively sit up straighter. His eyes, deep-set and sharp, assess you, not with judgment, but with an ancient, practiced scrutiny. He doesn't speak, of course. He simply raises a single finger and points to a large wooden board hanging on the wall. On it are not words, but drawings, a simple, visual guide to the laws of the space. The first drawing shows a figure with a finger pressed to his lips, obvious. The next shows a monk pointing aggressively at another. A thick red line is painted through it, no accusing. Another drawing depicts two monks with their heads together, whispering. It too is crossed out. No gossip, no collusion. You see a drawing of a book left open, face down, crossed out. A drawing of a dirty hand reaching for a clean sheet of vellum, crossed out. It's a complete, wordless doctrine of discipline. This is your new law. You begin to understand that the silence isn't just about preventing distraction. It's a tool for sanding down the ego. To speak is to assert yourself, to claim space with your voice. Dear, you claim nothing. You are a vessel, a conduit through which words will flow. But you are not the source. The work is what matters, not the worker. This is a concept that historians often highlight. The deliberate cultivation of humility in monastic life. The anonymity of the scribe was a feature, not a bug. Most of the breathtakingly beautiful manuscripts that survive today are unsigned. The glory was for God, not for the man holding the pen. Suddenly, a sound shatters the quiet. It's a sharp clatter of metal on stone. A few desks away, a young novice like yourself has dropped his scraping knife. In the bustling world you came from, it would be nothing. Dear, it is an explosion. Every head in the room snaps up. There are no gasps, no angry glares. Just a collective, silent flinch, as if everyone felt a simultaneous jolt of pain. The clumsy novice freezes, his face flushing a deep, mortified crimson. He doesn't dare bend to pick it up. The Armorius turns his head slowly, his gaze falling upon the boy. He walks over, bends down with a quiet grunt, and picks up the fallen tool. He places it gently on the novice's desk, then taps the desk twice with his knuckle. It's not a punishment. It's a reset. A silent, compose yourself. Begin again. The moment passes. The rhythmic scratching of quills resumes, a sound like gentle rain returning after a sudden thunderclap. You have just witnessed a full-blown drama. conducted in absolute silence. This is why the sign language you learn it about is so critical. You spend the morning observing it in action. A monk across the room holds up his hand and rubs his two fingers and thumb together, a sign for pigment. Another lightly scratches his ear with his index finger, a sign. You later learn, for a book written by a pagan author, mimicking a dog scratching at a flea. It's a strange, almost comical detail, a bit of monastic wit hidden in the solemnity. The sign for needing a new book to copy is to hold out your hands and mime the slow turning of pages. You practice the gestures in your mind, a new and silent vocabulary. But was the silence ever truly absolute? Every minute of the day. This is a point of lively debate among medieval scholars. A central practice in Benedictine monasteries was lectio divina, or divine reading. This wasn't silent reading as you know it. The idea was to read the scripture with one's whole body, which often involved murmuring the words aloud to better absorb their meaning. Some historians argue that the Scriptorium, for parts of the day, would have been filled with a low, collective hum of Latin, the murmuratio. It would have been a soft, almost hypnotic sound, the blended voices creating a unique auditory texture, far from the stark silence you're experiencing now. For other, more austere orders, this would have been unthinkable. The line between sacred murmuring and distracting noise was a thin one, likely drawn differently by every abbot. For now, however, your world is one of quiet observation. The armorius finally brings you your first task. He places a smooth, worn stone on your desk, and beside it, a piece of folded parchment. It is not yet vellum, but a practice sheet. He makes a circular motion with the stone on the parchment. Your job is not to write, not to draw, not even to rule lines. Your job is simply to polish the surface, over and over, until it is as smooth as glass. It's a menial, repetitive task. But, as you begin, you understand. It's a lesson in patience, in control, in learning to make your hands do the same small, perfect motion, time and time again, without thought or complaint. It is the first step in taming your restless mind and preparing it for the sacred silence of the work to come. The practice sheet is gone. Today, the armorius places something new on your desk. It's a large, stiff, creamy, white sheet, heavier than any paper you've ever felt. It's cool to the touch and gives off a faint, almost musky odor, like clean wood and old leather. This is vellum, the very soul of the Scriptorium. As you run your fingers over its surface, you feel a subtle grain, a texture that speaks of its origin. This isn't a product from a factory. It was once alive. Your task for the next several days is not to write on it, but to learn its story, to understand the brutal, painstaking process that transforms a simple animal hide into this pristine canvas for the Word of God. The lesson begins not in the quiet of the Scriptorium, but in the noisy, foul-smelling outbuildings of the monastery. You are led there by an older, burly brother, a man whose hands are permanently stained and calloused. Here, the serene, intellectual world of the Scriptorium gives way to a more visceral reality. You see rawhides, sheep, and goat, soaking in a large wooden vat filled with a milky white liquid. The stench is eye-watering. It's a lime solution, used to loosen the hair from the skin. The brother, with a grunt of effort, pulls one out. It's a slimy, unpleasant thing. He drapes it over a curved wooden beam and hands you a long, blunt-bladed knife. Your job is to scrape. You press the blade against the slick surface and push. The hair and remaining bits of flesh come away in a disgusting clump. It's hard, messy work that makes your back and shoulders ache. For days, this is your life. The hides are soaked, scraped, washed in clean water, and then stretched taut on a large, circular wooden frame called a hearse. This is the crucial stage. As the skin dries under tension, its entire structure changes. The collagen fibers align themselves into a thin, opaque, and incredibly durable sheet. You walk around the stretched skins, tightening the pegs to ensure the tension is perfectly even. They slip here, a loose peg there, and the entire sheet could be ruined. Worked, or torn. Once dry, the hide is cut from the frame. It's stiff, and the surface is still rough, with a flesh side and a hair side. The hair side, where the follicles once were, is slightly smoother and considered the superior side for writing. Now the real artistry begins. You are given a lunel, a crescent-shaped knife, and taught to carefully scrape the surface to a uniform thickness. You have to be incredibly careful. Too much pressure and you'll create a thin spot, or disaster, a rule. Too little, and the surface will be uneven, causing the ink to bleed. This process gives you a profound respect for the material. Each sheet of vellum represents an immense amount of labor and, more importantly, life. A single large Bible could require the skins of over 100 calves to create the necessary uter on vellum, the finest quality material made from unborn or newborn animals. This is a common historical fact, but holding the material in your hand makes it real. You understand why a book was a treasure, as valuable as a farm or a vineyard. Back in the relative peace of the Scriptorium, you learn the final steps. You take a block of pumice and rub the surface of the vellum in slow, circular motions, smoothing out any remaining imperfections. Then, you dust it with a fine powder, often made from ground cuttlefish bone or chalk, kept in a small cloth bag called a pouch. This powder absorbs any residual oils from the skin, preventing the ink from feathering and ensuring a crisp, clean line. The process is meticulous, repetitive, and deeply satisfying. The vellum transforms under your hands, becoming progressively smoother, paler, more perfect. One of the odd little details you learn is how to deal with an oily spot you missed. An experienced scribe might lick the spot. The enzymes in saliva would break down the grease just enough for the ink to adhere properly. It's a strange, intimate connection between the scribe and his material, a far cry from the sterile, mass-produced paper you might be used to. As you work, you notice the older monks examining their sheets against the light. They are looking for flaws, tiny holes, remnants of insect bites or scars the animal acquired in life, were a constant problem. This is where a fascinating debate among manuscript specialists arises. What did they do with these holes? Some scribes would painstakingly sew them shut with fine thread. Others would simply write around them, but the most creative ones would incorporate them into their art. There are famous examples of a scribe drawing a little figure pointing at a hole with a caption that says, "Look, a hole," or even drawing a small demon peeking through it. Was this a sign of frustration, a moment of levity, or a way of acknowledging that perfection is an illusion, even in a sacred task? Scholars still ponder the motivations behind these clever, flaw-embracing illuminations. Finally, your first sheet is ready. It lies on your desk, a luminous, perfect rectangle. It is no longer just a piece of dead animal. It is a surface charged with potential. Waiting, the journey from the smelly lime pit to this polished, pristine state has taught you more than just a craft. It has taught you that reverence begins with the raw material, that holiness is achieved through labor, and that before a single word can be written, a silent, humble foundation must be laid. Now that your vellum is a pristine, silent field of possibility, it cannot yet receive a single letter. It needs an ink worthy of its surface. Your education continues as the Almarius leads you away from the Scriptorium again, this time to a small, cluttered workshop that smells of vinegar, damp earth, and something vaguely metallic. This is the domain of ink making, a process that feels less like a craft and more like a strange, medieval alchemy. On a heavy wooden table, you see the core ingredients laid out. They are not what you would expect. First, there's a cloth sack filled with small, hard, lumpy spheres. The Almarius takes one and cracks it open. Inside is a complex, woody structure. These are oak galls, or capels. You learn that they are growths formed on oak trees when a gall wasp lays its eggs in the living wood. The tree, in reaction to the larvae's chemicals, creates this bizarre, tumor-like growth around it. It's a weird piece of natural history that you'd never have imagined would be central to the preservation of knowledge. These galls are rich in tannic and gallic acids, the essential ingredients for the ink. The process begins. You take a heavy stone mortar and pestle and start crushing the oak galls into a coarse powder. It's hard work, and the dust that rises is dry and acrid, making you want to sneeze, a desire you have to suppress out of habit from the Scriptorium as silence. Next, a binder is added. This is where recipes could vary wildly. The most common binder is gum arabic, a hardened sap from the acacia tree, imported all the way from the Middle East. It's expensive. A cheaper, more local alternative is cherry or plum tree gum. The armorius hands you a jar of clear, golden rainwater, which he explains is better than well water as it contains fewer impurities. You pour it over the powdered galls, and the mixture immediately turns a pale, tea-like color. This mixture is left to ferment for several days, to steep and draw out all the acids. But the key ingredient, the one that will create the deep, permanent black, is still missing. The armorius points to a small wooden box filled with rusty nails, old bits of iron, and metal shavings. This is the vitriol. You add this iron to the acidic gall mixture. A chemical reaction begins. The tannic acids react with the iron salts to form ferritinate. Right now, it's a sludgy, unimpressive gray, but as it oxidizes, as it's exposed to air, it will transform into ferritinate, a deep, rich, blue-black compound that is both waterproof and light-fast. This is the famous iron gall ink, the standard writing fluid of Europe for over 1,000 years. Its permanence is its greatest virtue and its greatest flaw. As it ages over centuries, the acidic ink literally eats through the vellum or paper it's on, leaving behind a brown, ghostly halo or even a hole where the letter used to be. You can see this effect in many surviving medieval manuscripts, where the paper around the letters is burned. Now for a bit of weird trivia. Scribes were constantly tasting their ink, not because they enjoyed it, but as a primitive form of quality control. A certain level of sourness from the vinegar sometimes added to the mix, or the bitterness of the galls, could indicate if the recipe was correct. It was a hands-on, or rather, tongue-on, method of chemistry. You watch as the armorius dips a single finger into the slurry, touches it to his tongue with a grimace, and gives a slight, satisfied nod. The ink is good, but not all ink was black. For corrections or emphasis, a different ink was needed. The recipe for red ink, called rubric, was simpler and often used minerals like red lead or vermilion made from cinnabar, a toxic mercury sulfide, ground into a fine powder and mixed with a binder like egg white. The act of adding these red titles or initial letters was called rubrication. This is where we get the modern word rubric, meaning a heading or a set of instructions, because in manuscripts, the instructions were often written in red. The question of ink recipes is a fascinating area of historical contention. There was no single, universally accepted formula for iron gall ink. Every monastery, every scriptorium, had its own secret recipe. Some added wine or beer instead of water, believing the alcohol aided the fermentation process. Others added sugar or honey to make the ink shinier. Manuscript historians can sometimes trace the origin of a book, or even identify the work of a specific scriptorium just by chemically analyzing the unique fingerprint of its ink. These subtle variations are like a hidden signature, revealing a network of shared knowledge or isolated innovation across medieval Europe. After days of steeping and occasional stirring, the ink is finally ready. It is strained through a piece of cloth to remove the sediment, leaving a dark, fluid liquid. The armorius pours a small amount into a horn, a hollowed-out cow's horn, the standard inkwell of the time. He hands it to you. It feels heavy, substantial. You carry it back to your desk in the scriptorium with a reverence you didn't have before. You now understand that this dark, unassuming liquid is not just a fluid. It is a carefully brewed potion of wasp larvae, tree growth, rust, and rain. It is a testament to human ingenuity, a substance designed to turn fleeting thoughts into something that might just last forever. With a luminous sheet of vellum on your desk and a horn of dark, potent ink at your side, you might think you are ready to write. You are not. There is one final, crucial tool you must master. an object so personal to a scribe that it was often considered an extension of his own hand. The quill. The armarius doesn't just give you a pen. He gives you a lesson in creating one. He lays a small bundle on your desk. Inside are the 5 or 6 large flight feathers from the outer wing of a goose. You learn that goose feathers were the most common choice, prized for their size, strength, and flexibility. Swan feathers were more luxurious and reserved for the most important work, while crow feathers were used for fine, detailed lines. The best feathers, you are told, came from the left wing of the bird, as their curve fits more comfortably into the hand of a right-handed scribe. For a left-handed scribe, the opposite was true. It's a small, practical detail that speaks to a deep, empirical knowledge of their craft. The feather in your hand feels light and slightly oily. It is not yet a pen. It is raw potential. The first step, the armarius demonstrates, is to harden it. He takes a feather and plunges the barrel, the thick, hollow part, into a pot of hots, and that's it warming near a small brazier in the corner of the workshop. The heat tempers the keratin, making it less brittle and more durable. After a few moments, he pulls it out. The end is now slightly translucent and harder. This process was called dutching, and its exact method is still a topic of some discussion. Did they use only hot sand? Or were other chemical treatments involved to make the perfect quill? The records are sparse, leading modern historians and calligraphers to experiment and debate. Now comes the most important part, cutting the nib. The armarius hands you a small, razor-sharp knife, known as a penknife. This is the origin of the modern pocket knife, an invention born from the daily needs of a scribe. He shows you the sequence of cuts. First, a long, sloping cut to remove the very tip of the barrel, exposing the hollow interior. Then, 2 shorter cuts on the sides to begin shaping the nib. The most critical cut is the final one, a tiny slit made right in the center of the nib. This slit is the heart of the quill. It acts as a reservoir, holding a small bead of ink through capillary action, and its flexibility allows the scribe to vary the width of the line with pressure. He hands the knife to you. It's your turn. Your first attempt is a disaster. You apply too much pressure, and the delicate tip splinters. The armarius simply shakes his head, takes the feather, snips off the ruined end, and gestures for you to try again. Your second attempt is better, but the slit is off-center. On the third try, you manage a clumsy but functional point. You can feel the sweat on your brow despite the room's chill. This is not just a craft. It's a form of meditation requiring absolute focus. A good scribe could cut a new point in under a minute, and would have to do so multiple times a day as the soft keratin wore down. One of the fascinating, and frankly slightly gross, bits of trivia about this process is that a scribe would often put the newly cut nib in his mouth. The moisture from his saliva would soften the keratin just slightly, making it more flexible and improving the ink flow for the first few strokes. It was another one of those strangely intimate connections between the scribe and his tools. You now have a vellum sheet, a horn of ink, and a freshly cut quill. You dip the nib into the inkhorn, feeling the slight vibration as the ink is drawn up into the slit. You lift it, and a tiny, perfect drop of black ink hangs from the point, glistening in the light from the window. The weight of the moment is immense. For weeks, you have scraped, polished, ground, and cut. You have learned the smells, the textures, and the disciplines of this silent world. Now, you must make a mark. You rest your hand on the vellum, the skin of the calf feeling smooth and cool beneath your own. You hold the quill at the prescribed angle, a steep 45 degrees. You take a breath, trying to steady your trembling fingers. You remember the silent admonishment from the novice who dropped his knife. An error now would be 100 times worse. A drip of ink, a smear, would desecrate this perfect surface you worked so hard to prepare. You press the nib to the vellum. There is a sound, a tiny, crisp, satisfying scratch. It's not the smooth glide of a modern pen on paper. It's a sound with texture, a whisper of friction between a bird's feather and a sheep's skin. You draw a straight line down. The ink flows from the nib in a dark, clean stroke. You press a little harder, and the line widens. You ease up, and it thins. This is what the masters do with such effortless grace. It is a language of pressure. You spend the rest of the day simply practicing these strokes. Vertical lines, horizontal lines, curves. You fill your practice sheet with them, learning the feel of the quill, the way it responds, the exact moment it needs to be re-dipped in the ink. You are not writing words yet. You are learning the atomic units of writing, the fundamental components from which all letters will be built. It's like a musician practicing scales, over and over, until the instrument becomes a part of them. And all the while, the only sound is the rhythmic, gentle scratching of your quill, joining the soft chorus of the Scriptorium. Your practice strokes have become steady and confident. The time has come to impose order on the luminous wilderness of the blank vellum page. A manuscript page is not a free-form canvas. It is a highly structured, almost architectural space. Before a single word of scripture can be written, a hidden framework must be built. Today, you learn the art of ruling. The Amarius approaches your carrel and places two new tools on your desk. The first is a straight edge, a simple ruler made of smooth, dark wood. The second is more curious. It looks like a small stylus, a piece of wood with a pointed tip. But as you pick it up, you notice its point is not sharp and dark like graphite, but soft and silvery. This is a lead point, or more accurately, a stylus made from a lead tin alloy. It doesn't leave a dark, permanent mark like a modern pencil. Instead, it creates a faint, shimmering silver-gray line that is just visible enough for you to follow. This process is called plummeting. He then hands you a pair of compasses, or dividers. This tool is for measuring, not for drawing circles. Your first task is to establish the margins. The layout of a medieval page was a matter of intense aesthetic and mathematical consideration. They didn't just guess. Scribes often used complex geometric constructions, based on principles that went back to Pythagoras and Euclid, to create what they saw as a divinely harmonious page. The proportions of the text block to the margins were often based on the golden ratio. You watch the master scribe next to you. He doesn't just start drawing lines. He pricks tiny, almost invisible holes in the vellum at the top and bottom of the page with the sharp point of his dividers. These holes, called pricking S, act as a guide. He then aligns his straight edge with the pricking S on opposite sides of the page and draws the faint lead lines, creating the vertical boundaries of his columns. The text on a high-status Bible or scholarly work was almost always written into columns, a tradition inherited from the scrolls of antiquity. Now you try. You carefully measure out your margins, your heart pounding as you press the point of the dividers into the perfect vellum. One slip, one accidental hole, and the sheet is marred. You make your pricking S along the edges, tiny wounds in the skin. Then, you take the lead point on the straight edge. The metallic stylus glides over the vellum with a faint, whispering sound, leaving behind a ghostly grid. You rule the horizontal lines for the text, one for each line of writing. The space between these lines must be perfectly consistent, and it determines the size of your script. You're essentially creating a cage for the words. It feels restrictive, almost clinical, but you realize its purpose. This grid ensures uniformity, not just on one page, but across the entire book. When the book is finished and bound, the text blocks on facing pages will align perfectly, creating a sense of balance and order that is deeply pleasing to the eye. It is a visual representation of the divine order the text itself describes. A lesser-known and rather clever method for ruling, especially on thinner vellum, didn't involve a lead point at all. A scribe would place a ruled sheet underneath the blank one and then, using a smooth, blunt stylus, press down along the lines. This would create a slight furrow, or a blind ruled line, in the top sheet without leaving any mark. It was a cleaner method, but required a very steady hand. The debate over which method was better is one of those small, specific arguments that manuscript experts love. Some see evidence of lead. Others see only the faint impression of blind ruling. and they use this to trace the practices of different scriptoria. As you work, you notice something fascinating. The lines are not always evenly spaced. The scribe next to you is ruling a page for a psalter, a book of psalms, for certain psalms that were to be sung. He rules an extra line above the text line, not for words, but for musical notation. The simple, square-shaped notes called noemias that guided the monastic choir. It's a reminder that these books were not always for silent reading. They were living tools for worship, performance, and sound. A strange bit of trivia from this stage of the process involves the occasional discovery of pages with a full grid ruled on them, but with no text. These are sometimes called sleeping manuscripts. Why were they abandoned? Did the scribe get reassigned? Did the monastery run out of ink? Or did the patron who commissioned the book die or run out of money? Each blank, ruled page is a tiny, unsolved mystery, a story that was prepared for but never told. You finish ruling your first page. The vellum, once a blank expanse, is now tamed. It is covered in a delicate, shimmering web of silver lines, a matrix of potential. It looks like a field that has been perfectly plowed and is now ready for seeding. The hard, structural work is done. The silence of the Scriptorium feels different now. It's no longer a passive quiet. It's a silence of anticipation. The page is waiting. The ink is waiting. The quill is waiting. And now, finally, you are ready to give it a voice. You pick up your quill, dip it in the ink, and move your hand not to the practice sheet, but to the top of the first ruled column on your pristine, gridded page. The moment has come. The world narrows to a single point of black ink glistening on the tip of your quill. The entire room, with its shuffling monks and dancing dust motes, fades away. All that exists is you, the faint silver grid on the creamy vellum, and the tremor in your hand that you pray doesn't translate to the page. You are about to write your first real letter as a scribe. The Armorius has given you your text. It's not from a grand gospel book. For an apprentice, the work begins with something more foundational, often a psalter or the epistles of Paul. He unrolls a master copy, an older manuscript, and places it honest and next to your desk. Your task is not to create, not to compose, but to replicate. Perfectly, every stroke, every space, every letter must be a faithful echo of the original. You look at the master text. The script is a dent, a bright, and beautiful hand known as Carolingian minuscule. It was a revolutionary script for its time, developed under the reign of Charlemagne to be clear, legible, and standardized across his vast empire. It features distinct upper and lowercase letters, a novelty at the time, and clear separation between words, which was not always the case in earlier scripts like the dense, unseparated script IO continua of late antiquity. Your first word is in a simple word, 2 letters, but it begins a verse, so the I is a majuscule, a capital letter. You take a breath, the air tasting of chalk, dust, and old wax. You steady your right hand with your left, pressing your wrist against the cool wood of the desk. You touch the nib to the vellum at the very top of the ruled line. SCROTCH. The sound is louder, more definitive than on your practice sheet. This one counts. You draw the vertical stem of the I downwards, trying to keep the pressure even. The black ink flows, a stark, beautiful scar on the pale skin. It's not perfect. It wavers slightly halfway down, a testament to the nervous pulse in your thumb. You lift the quill. Then you add the top and bottom serifs, the small, horizontal strokes that finish the letter. You have made your mark. It is permanent. Next, the N. This is a minuscule, a lowercase letter. You remember the practice strokes. A short downward stroke, then lift, go back to the top, and an arching stroke that curves down and to the right. You form the letter. It's a little clumsy, a bit thicker than the one in the master copy, but it's recognizable. You've written a word. A profound, almost dizzying sense of accomplishment washes over you. You continue to the next word, principio. In the beginning, the letters flow one after the other. You fall into a rhythm. Your mind focused on the microscopic details, the angle of the pen, the space between the letters, the interletter space, the space between the words, the interword space. It is a dance of intense concentration. You realize that copying text is not reading. You are so focused on the shape of each letter that the meaning of the words almost disappears. You are drawing, not writing. This phenomenon is a well-documented part of the scribe's experience. Monks could spend months copying a book and, at the end, have very little memory of the content they had just transcribed. Their focus was on fidelity to the form. This intense, non-semantic reading is a form of meditation in itself, a way of emptying the mind of its own thoughts and filling it with the discipline of the script. Then, a small disaster. On the letter A in a red, your hand jerks. A small blob of ink, a tiny, dark teardrop, falls onto the vellum just below the letter. Panic seizes you. It's a blinding, cold feeling in your gut. You have failed. You have ruined the page. The vellum that took so much work to prepare. You freeze, your quill hovering over the page, not daring to move. The old monk next to you notices your paralysis. He doesn't look at you. He simply continues his own work. But you hear him clear his throat. A soft, deliberate sound. It's a signal. You glance over. He subtly gestures with his eyes towards a small knife on his desk, the one used for scraping. He is telling you to fix it. Silently. This is a critical skill for any scribe, the art of correction. You wait for the inkblot to dry completely. This is the hardest part, resisting the urge to touch it, to wipe it, which would only create a hideous smear. Once it's dry, you take your sharpest, finest bladed knife. Holding your breath, you begin to gently scrape the surface of the vellum. Tiny flakes of black ink and the very top layer of the skin lift away. It's like performing surgery on a butterfly's wing. Scrape to deep, and you'll create a fuzzy, thin patch where new ink will bleed uncontrollably. After what feels like an eternity, the blood is gone. A faint, slightly rough patch remains, visible only if you catch the light just right. You take your pumice stone and burnish the area lightly to smooth it down. The page is safe. The relief is so profound it leaves you feeling weak. Here's a fun, quirky fact about scribal errors. Sometimes, if a scribe omitted a word or a whole line, they wouldn't scrape it all away. Instead, they would draw a small symbol, a caret, in the text where the missing word should go, and then write the omitted text in the margin, often with a little line drawn to the insertion point. Sometimes these marginal additions had tiny, playful drawings, like a hand pointing the way or a little face looking at the added text. The question of accuracy in copying is a massive field of academic study. How accurate were these scribes? The answer is, surprisingly so, but not perfectly. Tiny errors, a misread letter, a repeated word, were inevitable. These small mistakes, when copied by the next scribe, and the next, could multiply and change over generations, leading to different families of manuscripts for the same text. Biblical scholars, for instance, spend their entire careers comparing these variations to try and reconstruct what the most original version of the text might have been. The idea of a single, authoritative original is often an illusion. What we have is a web of human-made copies, each with its own tiny, unique history of errors and corrections. You finish your first line of text. You lean back, your shoulders aching. It has taken you nearly an hour. The master scribe next to you has filled half a column in the same amount of time. But your line is there. It is straight. It is legible. It is a testament to your focus and a record of your near disaster. You dip your quill again, your hand a little steadier this time. The first letter was a test of nerve. The first line was a test of skill. The rest of the page, you understand now, will be a test of endurance. Days bleed into weeks. The novelty of writing your first letter has worn off, replaced by the stark, unchanging reality of the work. You arrive in the pre-dawn cold. You take your seat. You unroll the master text, and you write, line after line, page after page. The initial terror of making a mistake has subsided into a low gray, constant vigilance. Your world has shrunk to the space between two ruled lines, and a new feeling is settling in. A profound, bone-deep ache. Your back, bent over the slanted desk for hours, feels like a single, solid knot of tension. Your eyes burn from straining to see the fine details in the shifting light. But most of all, your writing hand cramps into a claw. The 3 fingers that grip the quill, the thumb, index, and middle, are stiff and sore. This physical toll was a universal complaint among scribes. You can find the elements scribbled in the margins of the very manuscripts they were working on. One famous coffin, a note at the end of a manuscript, reads, "Writing is excessive drudgery. It cooks your back. It dims your sight. It twists your stomach and your sides." They were not shy about the misery. It is in this crucible of repetitive labor that you begin to find a strange, new rhythm. At first, your mind wandered constantly. You thought about the warm bed you left, the taste of the thin vegetables you'll have for lunch, the face of your family in the village you left behind. But slowly, imperceptibly, that mental chatter begins to fade. The relentless focus required by the work acts like a form of purification. The sound of your quill becomes the center of your universe. Scratch, scratch, lift, dip, scratch, scratch, lift. It's a tiny, dry, rhythmic sound, like an insect chewing on a leaf. In the profound silence of the Scriptorium, this sound, multiplied by 24 scribes, creates a unique auditory landscape. It's a soft, continuous, textural hiss, a kind of medieval white noise. You begin to sink your breathing to it. Inhale on the dip, exhale on the stroke. The physical act of writing becomes a physical mantra. This is the meditative state that was the secret goal of the entire enterprise. It wasn't just about producing books. It was about shaping the soul of the producer by forcing the body and mind into a state of prolonged, disciplined focus on a sacred text. The act of copying became a form of prayer, a way of communing with God without words. The rhythm of the work was meant to quiet the ego and open a space for contemplation. You start to notice the rhythms of the other monks through their sounds. The old master scribe to your right has a slow, steady, unhurried scratch. It never falters, never changes pace. It is the sound of pure, practiced confidence. The young novice across the aisle is all nervous energy. His scratching is fast and jerky, with frequent, longer pauses that you know are moments of self-doubt or correction. You can map the emotional state of the entire room just by listening to the chorus of quills. One day, you find a small, folded note on your stool. It's a rare violation of the silent rule, but it's from the Armorius. It's not words, but a drawing. It shows a simple wooden contraption, a string with a weight on the end, designed to hold the page of the master text open. It's a silent suggestion. You fashion one for yourself, and it eases the strain on your neck. This is a fascinating tidbit of Scriptorium life. The small, personal hacks and inventions scribes developed to make their grueling work more bearable. Some used polished stones to weigh down their vellum. Others crafted elaborate bookmarks from scraps of leather. These small, practical innovations are rarely mentioned in official monastery rules, but evidence of them abounds. The long hours of silent work also lead to a strange relationship with the text itself. As mentioned, you often don't process the meaning, but sometimes a phrase will jump out at you, snagging on your consciousness. You might be copying a psalm of despair, and the words "Deep profundus clamav I et te, Domini, out of the depths I cry to you, O Lord," will suddenly resonate with the ache in your own back. The sacred text ceases to be an abstract thing and becomes a mirror to your own immediate, physical experience. This leads to a question that historians and theologians still debate. Did the scribes' personal feelings or theological interpretations ever influence their copying? The ideal was perfect, unthinking fidelity, but were they truly automatons? It's almost certain that on a subconscious level, tiny changes could creep in. A scribe who was particularly devoted to the Virgin Mary might, without realizing it, use a slightly more reverent form of a word when referring to her. A scribe who is tired on rushing to finish a line might unconsciously choose a shorter, more common synonym for a word. These are not grand conspiracies to alter the text, but the subtle, unavoidable fingerprints of the human mind. Proving this, of course, is incredibly difficult, but it's a tantalizing possibility that reminds us these text machines were still living, feeling human beings. As the sun arcs across the sky, testing a long, golden rectangle of light that moves slowly across the floor, you feel yourself settling into the work. The pain in your hand is still there, but it's a familiar companion now. The silence is no longer a burden. It's a comfort. The rhythmic scratching of your quill is no longer a task. It's a heartbeat. You have passed through the fire of initiation and are beginning to understand the deep, paradoxical nature of this place. That in the most rigid and repetitive of structures, a strange kind of freedom can be found. One afternoon, the steady, rhythmic scratching in the Scriptorium is punctuated by a different sound. A sharp, almost violent crack. It's followed by a muffled curse, a sound so shocking in the deep silence that it feels like a physical blow. You and every other scribe look up, your quills frozen mid-air. It's Brother Michael, a senior scribe known for his skill and his famously short temper. He is standing over his desk, his face a mask of fury and despair. On his beautifully written page, a disaster has unfolded. A flaw in his quill, a moment of too much pressure, has caused the nib to split, spraying a spitterbear of black ink across a nearly completed folio. Hours of work, ruined in an instant. The Armarius, who seems to materialize from the shadows whenever a crisis occurs, is instantly at his side. He places a calming hand on Michael's shoulder. There is no scolding, only a quiet, shared understanding of the catastrophe. This is the ever-present danger of the Scriptorium. The knowledge that your work is always one heartbeat, one shaky hand, away from ruin. But the Armarius doesn't reach for a scraper. The damage is too great. Instead, he gestures for two novices to carefully lift the entire sheet from the desk. It will be taken away, perhaps to be scraped completely clean and repurposed for practice, a process called creating a palimpsest, where old text is erased to make way for new. Michael watches it go, his shoulders slumped in defeat. He then picks up his broken quill, snaps it into with his bare hands, and storms out of the Scriptorium, the heavy oak door slamming shut behind him. The sound echoes like a gunshot. The silence that descends now is thick and heavy with shared frustration. Every scribe in the room has felt that same rage, that same soul-crushing disappointment. It's a moment of collective, unspoken empathy. This is when you truly learn how to fix your own smaller mistakes, not out of a desire for perfection, but out of a desperate need to avoid Michael's fate. You learn that there are levels to correction. For a small link blot, you have the scraper. For a single wrong letter, you also scrape. But what if you omit a whole word? Scraping out of space is impractical. This is where you learn the use of the caret in the margin. You place the little pointed symbol in the line of text and write the missing word in the blank space of the margin. This was a universally accepted method. But what if you wrote a word twice, or wrote the wrong word entirely? You couldn't just leave it. This is where a very specific technique comes in. Expunctuation. You don't scrape the word away. Instead, you place a series of tiny, neat dots underneath the incorrect word. This was the scribal equivalent of the strikertha function. It was a signal to the reader. I wrote this. I see that it is wrong, but I am leaving it here. Please ignore it. It was a visible, honest admission of error. A truly quirky and less common method of correction was simply to paint over the mistake with a thick, opaque white pigment, sometimes made from lead. You would then write the correct letter or word on top of the white patch. This was a quicker fix, but less elegant, and over the centuries, the white paint often flaked off, revealing the original mistake underneath. It's a little gift for modern manuscript detectives. The Armarius returns to the room and silently places a new, pristine sheet of vellum on Brother Michael's empty desk. The message is clear. The only solution to failure is to begin again. Michael will return, and he will start over. The work endures, even when the worker falters. This quiet, active replacement teaches you more about the monastery's philosophy than any sermon could. The role of the armarius, or librarian, is a point of interesting scholarly discussion. Was he merely a manager, a foreman of the Scriptorium, or was he more like a modern editor-in-chief? Evidence suggests his role was multifaceted. He assigned the texts, managed the precious supply of vellum and ink, and enforced the rules of silence, but he was also the final proofreader. Before a book was sent to the binder, the armarius would read through it, comparing it against the master copy. He would mark any final errors for correction, sometimes in the margin with a very faint lead point. His notes are a treasure for historians, giving insight into what was considered a significant error versus a minor slip. The level of intervention varied greatly. Some were hands-off, while others were meticulous, almost obsessive. Editors, after the drama with Brother Michael, you look down at your own work with a renewed sense of humility. You see your own small errors, a letter that's slightly too wide, a space that's a fraction too narrow. You had previously seen them as failures. Now, you see them differently. They are not just mistakes. They are marks of your humanity. They are the visible record of your struggle against the entropy of distraction, fatigue, and frustration. You pick up your own scraper to fix a small smudge. As you carefully flake away the dark ink, you think of the palimpsest. This is a powerful metaphor, a surface holding the ghost of an older text beneath a new one. It's a reminder that the past is never truly erased. It's just written over. You realize the Scriptorium is not just producing copies of old books. It's producing layers of human effort, each page a testament to the quiet, daily, often frustrating battle for a small measure of perfection. For months, your world has been one of monochrome, the creamy white of the vellum and the stark, satisfying black of the iron Gall ink. It is a world of pure information, of unadorned text. But today, that world is about to burst into color. Your apprenticeship is taking a new turn. You are moving from the humble role of a scribe scriptor to the more specialized and revered craft of an illuminator. The armarius leads you to a different corner of the Scriptorium, a space bathed in the best possible light from a large northern window. Here, the air smells different. The earthy scent of ink is mingled with something sharper, more mineral, and a faint, glowing sweetness you can't quite place. This is the illuminator station. Instead of just inkhorns, the desk is covered in dozens of small shells and ceramic pots, each containing a different colored pigment. It looks like a painter's palette, a splash of impossible vibrancy in the sullen, quiet room. Your first lesson is not in painting, but in grinding. The master illuminator, an old monk with ink-stained fingers and surprisingly bright, curious eyes, points to a heavy slab of porphyry stone and a small, smooth stone muller. Beside them is a small, rough, deep blue rock. He gestures for you to pick it up. It feels heavy, dense. This, he communicates through a series of slow, deliberate signs, is lapis lazuli. You learn its story. This stone is not from the hills behind the monastery. It is not even from this continent. It comes from a single set of mines, deep in the mountains of what will one day be called Afghanistan. It travels thousands of miles, passed from merchant to merchant along treacherous trade routes, to find its way to this quiet room. It is more valuable than gold, and from this ugly, common-looking rock, you will make the most sacred of colors, ultramarine blue, the color of the sky, the color of heaven, the color of the Virgin Mary's robes. Your task is to crush it. You place the stone on the slab and begin to grind it with the muller. It's even harder work than grinding the oak galls. It takes hours of relentless, circular motion to reduce the hard stone to a fine, gritty powder. Your arm aches, but the master illuminator watches, his gaze unwavering, until the powder is as fine as flour. But this powder is not yet a pigment. It is full of impurities. The master shows you the next, almost magical step. He takes the blue powder and mixes it into a soft, sticky dough made of pine resin, beeswax, and gum. He kneads the spluting dough for what seems like an eternity. Then he places the dough ball into a pot of lye, a weak alkaline solution. As he continues to knead the dough in the water, a miracle happens. The pure blue particles of lazurite, the heaviest element, separate from the gray impurities of the stone and sink to the bottom of the pot, turning the water a stunning, brilliant blue. It's a complex, multi-day process of washing and separating, a piece of practical chemistry that feels like a sacred rite. This process, detailed in medieval treatises like C. and Nino C. and Nini Zil Libro del Art, is one of the great secrets of the illuminator's craft. The resulting pigment is so pure, so vibrant, that it seems to glow on the page. Its expense meant it was used sparingly, reserved for the most important figures and elements in an illumination. Of course, not all pigments were so exotic. The illuminator points to the other pots. The brilliant red, you learn, is vermilion, made from the toxic mineral cinnabar mercury sulfide. The bright, cheerful yellow is opalment, another toxic substance, this time arsenic sulfide. The earthy greens are made from malachite or verdurix, a pigment created by hanging copper plates over vinegar. The illuminators were part chemists, part artists, and constantly working with a palette of poisonous materials. This is a chilling little fact. The creation of these beautiful, holy images was often a dangerous, health-destroying occupation. The binder for these pigments was also different from the inks. The sweet smell you noticed is from Gall, a binder made from whipping egg whites into a froth and letting the clear liquid settle. This egg temper created a durable, slightly glossy finish that held the pigment particles perfectly on the vellum. But what about the different shades and qualities of pigments? This is where historians find a fascinating puzzle. By using techniques like X-ray fluorescence, modern scientists can analyze the chemical composition of the pigments used in a manuscript without damaging it. They can tell if the blue on a page is the astronomically expensive ultramarine from Afghanistan or cheaper, or common blue made from the woad plant or a copper-based mineral called azurite. This analysis can reveal the budget of the project, the trade connections of the monastery, and sometimes even detect forgeries, where a later artist tried to touch up a manuscript with a pigment that didn't exist at the time it was made. Your first batch of ultramarine is ready. It's in a small seashell, a pool of celestial blue. The master illuminator dips a fine-tipped brush, made from the hairs of a squirrel's tail, into the pigment. On a practice sheet of vellum, he paints a single, perfect square of blue. The color is so intense, so pure, it almost vibrates. It feels alive. He hands the brush to you. Your hand, so used to the rigid, monochrome world of the scribe, now has to learn a new language, the language of color, of poison, of stone, and of light. Holding the fine-tipped squirrel hair brush feels alien. Your hand is trained for the firm, scratching resistance of the quill, not the soft, yielding glide of the painter's brush. The task before you now is not about information, but adoration. You are going to learn how to make the Word of God literally shine. You are going to learn the art of gilding. The master illuminator takes a page that has already been filled with text by a scribe. The scribe, however, has left a specific space empty. It's the very first letter of the page, a large, capital I from the phrase in principio. This is to be in historia that initial, an initial letter that contains a picture. But before any image can be painted, the most sacred element must be applied, gold. He shows you the materials. First, a small pot containing a thick, reddish brown clay mixture. This is gesso, a compound of gypsum, chalk, and a binder, often with a little bit of red clay or bowl mixed in to give the gold a warmer, richer tone when applied. Using a brush, he carefully paints this gesso onto the vellum, filling the shape of the capital I. He builds it up, layer by layer, creating a raised, three-dimensional surface. This is a crucial step. The gesso must be perfectly smooth. Any imperfection will show through the gold. He then sets the page aside to dry completely. Once it is hard, he takes a burnisher, a tool with a highly polished, smooth tip made of agate or a wolf's tooth, and rubs the dried gesso with incredible skill. The surface becomes as smooth and glossy as polished stone. This raised, polished bed is now ready to receive the gold. Next, he opens a small, precious book. Inside are not words, but impossibly thin sheets of pure gold, each one separated by a piece of paper. This is gold leaf. It is so thin that it is translucent, so light that a slight puff of breath would send it scattering into the air. The process of beating a small gold ingot into these thousands of whisper-thin sheets is a specialized craft in itself. Now for the magic. A master illuminator leans in close to the page and, with a soft, gentle breath, breathes on the raised gesso. The moisture from his breath, the huff, is just enough to make the surface tacky for a few seconds. In that fleeting moment, he uses a special tool called a gilder's tip, a wide, flat brush, to pick up a sheet of gold leaf. With a movement that is impossibly swift and steady, he lays the gold leaf down onto the tacky gesso. He gently presses it down with a bit of soft cotton. The gold adheres instantly. The excess, the part not touching the gesso, is brushed away, leaving a perfect, gleaming, golden ice standing proud from the page. But it's not finished. It's still a matte, dull gold. He picks up the agate burnisher again. With firm, smooth strokes, he polishes the surface of the gold leaf. As he rubs, an incredible transformation occurs. The dull metal comes alive. It begins to gleam, then to shine, until it has the brilliant, flawless surface of a mirror. It catches the light from the window and reflects it back, a dazzling flash of pure light. Now, it is your turn. On a practice sheet, you apply the gesso, build it up, and try to burnish it smooth. Your first attempt is lumpy. The second is a stray hair trapped in it. It takes days of practice to create a perfectly smooth foundation. Then you try to apply the leaf. Your breath is too harsh, and the delicate gold sheet crinkles and tears. You try again, and lay it down crooked. It is a craft of immense patience and gentleness. A quirky detail of this process is the gilder's cushion. A small, leather-padded board where the gold leaf was cut into the right shape with a special knife. And to pick up the delicate leaf, the gilder's tip brush was often charged by brushing it against the gilder's own hair or beard. The static electricity generated was just enough to make the gold leaf cling to the brush. It's another one of those strange, personal, almost ritualistic techniques. Was this raised and burnished gilding the only way? Not at all. There was a simpler method for applying gold to flatter areas, or for writing text in gold. This involved creating a gold paint by grinding the gold leaf into a powder and mixing it with a binder like gum arabic. This could then be applied with a quill or a brush. Just like ink, it produced a more subtle, less reflective effect, often called shell gold because the finished paint was kept in a seashell. Manuscript specialists still debate the symbolic significance of these two methods. Was the brilliant, reflective, three-dimensional burnished gold meant to represent the divine, heavenly light of God, while the flatter, more subdued shell gold represented a more earthly, human holiness? It's a compelling idea, suggesting that the very techniques used were a form of theological expression. You finally manage to lay a small square of gold leaf without ruining it. You pick up the burnisher. As you rub the surface, you feel the texture change under the stone. You see the dull metal transform into a shining mirror. It feels like you are polishing a tiny piece of the sun itself. You hold the vellum up, and a square of gold flashes, a beacon of pure light in the quiet, dusty room. You understand now why this art is called illumination. It is not about illustrating a text. It is about lighting it from within, making the page a window into a brighter, more holy world. You are not just a craftsman. You are a tender of the light. The golden, raised initial eye stands on the page, a shining pillar of light. It is beautiful, but it is not yet alive. Your next task as an apprentice illuminator is to breathe life into it, to transform this abstract shape of golden vellum into a scene of sacred story. You are going to paint God. In miniature, the master illuminator sits beside you, his presence a silent field of immense concentration. He is going to guide you through the creation of your first Historia Ted initial. The scene to be depicted within the eye is the creation of the world from the book of Genesis. It's a vast, cosmic subject to be contained within a space no bigger than your thumb. First, the drawing. Before any paint is applied, the scene must be sketched out. This was not done with a lead point, as its gray mark would be too clumsy and hard to cover. Instead, the master uses an incredibly fine brush or a quill dipped in a very pale, watery ink. Sometimes, a fine metal stylus or silver twabent was used, which left a delicate, barely there line. He begins to draw within the space of the golden eye. With a few, impossibly delicate strokes, he outlines the figure of God the Father. Then, the sphere of the newly formed earth. The drawing is not detailed. It is a ghost, a faint guide for the paint to come. Next comes the background. He takes the pot of brilliant ultramarine blue you prepared, with a new brush, fills in the space around the figure of God. The vibrant, celestial blue pushes the golden eye forward, creating a sense of divine space. The application of paint is not like modern oil painting. It's more like filling in a coloring book, but with infinitely higher stakes. The paint is applied in flat, opaque layers. Now he hands the brush to you. Your task is to paint the robes of the Creator. He points to a pot of rich, crimson paint made from vermilion. Your hand trembles as you dip the brush. You are about to color in Gall. You touch the brush to the vellum. Inside the faint lines of the drawing, the red is shockingly bright against the blue. You carefully fill in the shape of the robe, your breath held tight in your chest. The paint dries quickly, leaving a flat, matte field of color. This is where the true artistry begins. The master takes the brush back. He shows you that you don't create shadows and highlights by blending wet paint. You do it by layering. He takes a slightly darker shade of red and, with a series of tiny, fine lines, begins to paint in the folds of the robe. Then he takes a lighter shade, almost pink, and adds highlights where the cloth would catch the light. The flat shape of the robe suddenly gains form, depth, and volume. It's a slow, meticulous process of building up the image through hatching and layering. You begin to understand that an illumination is not a painting in the modern sense. It is a colored drawing. The line is supreme. The skill of the illuminator was judged by the fineness and confidence of his lines. A fascinating and weird detail about this process is the use of pattern books. Not every illuminator was a master artist capable of inventing new scenes from scratch. Many Scriptoria kept books filled with stock images and figures. A king enthroned, a kneeling saint, a snarling dragon. An illuminator could trace or copy these figures, combining them to create new scenes. It was a modular system of artistry. This is why you sometimes see the exact same posture or facial expression appear in manuscripts made decades or even hundreds of miles apart. They were working from the same visual library. The master now begins on the face and hands of the creator. This is the most difficult part. He uses a flesh-tone pigment and, with a brush that seems to have only a single hair, he paints the tiny, delicate features, a few lines for the eyes, a shadow for the nose, the curve of the mouth. The figure on the page, which was just a collection of colored shapes, suddenly has a gaze. It looks back at you. This leads to a contentious point among art historians. How much artistic freedom did illuminators really have? The subject matter was strictly controlled by tradition and theology. You couldn't just decide to paint the Virgin Mary in green. But within those constraints, there was room for personal style. Some illuminators were known for their gentle, serene figures. Others, particularly in the later Gothic period, were famous for their dramatic, emotional, and even grotesque imagery. By studying the specific way an artist paints the drape of a robe or the expression on a face, experts can sometimes identify the hand of a specific, unnamed artist, following his career as he moves from one monastery's workshop to another. They give these anonymous masters names like the Master of the Berry Apocalypse or the Bouc Master, based on the famous works they produced. The master illuminator adds the final touch. He takes a pot of brilliant, opaque white lead painting, with the very tip of his finest brush. Adds tiny, pinprick-sized dots of white to the eyes and to the highest folds of the robe. These are the final highlights. They catch the light and give the image a final spark of life. You lean back and look at the initial. It is no longer just a letter. It is a window. Through it, you can see a scene of cosmic creation, rendered in gold and crushed stone, all in a space smaller than a postage stamp. You have not just decorated a page. You have participated in the act of storytelling in its most sacred and visually splendid form. The silent, black and white world of the scribe has been irrevocably opened up to a universe of color and light, weeks turn into a season. The light slanting through the high Scriptorium windows grows warmer, and the damp chill in the stone floor lessens. You have found your place in the quiet rhythm of the monastery, alternating between the disciplined black and white world of the scribe and the vibrant, jewel-tone work of the illuminator. The life is hard, but it has a clean, simple certainty to it. One morning, you are tasked with retrieving an old book of hours from the library, Murian, for a senior monk to use as a reference. The library is not a grand, open hall like you might imagine. It's a small, secure, and rather dark room, often just a large, locked cupboard or a small chamber off the cloister. The books are not stored upright on shelves, but are laid flat, or sometimes kept in individual chests or satchels. The air is thick with the scent of old leather and vellum, a smell you've come to associate with reverence. You find the book you're looking for, a heavy volume with a worn leather cover. As you carry it carefully back to the Scriptorium, you notice something odd. On the edge of one of the thick vellum pages, there is a tiny, perfectly round hole, no bigger than a pinprick. You've seen flaws in the vellum before, scars, uneven patches, but this is different. It's too neat. You open the book to that page. You see that the hole is not a hole. It's a tunnel. It goes through the page, and the next, and the next. The tiny, burrowed path has been carved right through the sacred text and the beautiful illumination of the Annunciation. You follow the tunnel with your finger. It wends its way through 20 pages before it stops. You have just met the other, unofficial inhabitant of the Scriptorium, the bookworm. The term bookworm is a bit of a misnomer. It's not an actual worm. The damage is caused by the larvae of various species of beetle, most commonly the common furniture beetle or the death watch beetle. The adult beetle lays its eggs on the edge of the book, and when the tiny grub hatches, it begins to eat its way through the pages. It's not eating the words. Of course, it's consuming the vellum itself, or the starches in the paper and the animal-based glue used in the binding. For a tiny larva, a thick medieval book is a high-protein, multi-level feast. You show the damage to the Armorius. He examines the tiny tunnel with a practiced eye and a weary sigh. This is an ancient and constant battle. He takes a small brush and carefully sweeps out the frass, the fine, powdery excrement left behind by the larva. He then takes a thin needle and probes the tunnel, trying to see if the creature is still active within the pages. This was a major concern for medieval librarians. They had various methods, some more effective than others, to protect their precious collections. Books were aired out regularly in the sun, as the creatures preferred damp, dark conditions. Shelves and chests were often made of cedar wood, whose aromatic oils were believed to repel insects, and they would use various herbal remedies. The leaves of the tobacco plant, or wormwood, were often pressed between the pages, as their bitter taste was a deterrent. It's a strange bit of trivia to imagine a holy gospel smelling faintly of a cigar shop, but it was a practical matter of preservation. The existence of the bookworm, however, leads to one of the most charming and humanizing aspects of manuscript culture. The bookers, scribes and librarians, terrified of theft, damage, or insect infestation, would often write threatening curses in the front or back of their books. These were not gentle warnings. A typical curse might read, "For him that steal ETH, or borrow ETH and return then it not. Let him be followed by the palsy, and the sciatica, and all the ills that flesh is heir to. Let him be racked with pain, crying aloud for mercy, and let there be no surcease to his agony, till he sink into dissolution. Let bookworms gnaw his entrails in token of the worm that dieth not. They were invoking both physical torment and eternal damnation upon anyone who harmed their precious book. It's a stark reminder of just how valuable these objects were. But are bookworms real? This is a point of minor, almost playful, academic contention. Of course, the beetle larvae that cause the damage are real, but the term bookworm itself, and the image of a little worm literally reading its way through a book, is largely a metaphor. The poet and satirist Robert Burns famously wrote a poem to a bookworm who had eaten through a copy of Shakespeare. The idea became a popular trope, representing a pedantic or overly studious person who devours books without understanding them. So while the physical pest is real, the bookworm as a concept is a literary invention. Some purists in the field of book conservation will insist on calling them book-boring insects to be precise. You watch as the armorius finishes his inspection. The larva seems to be gone. The damage is done, but it is contained. He takes a tiny scrap of fresh vellum and, with a dab of glue made from fish bladder, he carefully patches the hole on the first affected page. It's a visible scar, an honest repair. He doesn't try to hide it. The book now carries the story of its own small battle for survival. As you place the repaired book on the senior monk's desk, you have a new appreciation for its journey. This book has survived for 100 years. It has survived the hands of countless readers, the slow decay of time, the changing seasons, and now, the blind hunger of a tiny insect. It is not just a repository of text and image. It is a resilient physical object, a survivor, and you are now part of its story, a guardian in the long, quiet, and unending war against decay. The long, hot days of summer have arrived. The air in the Scriptorium, once perpetually chilled, now grows heavy and still in the afternoons. The high windows, designed to let in light but not direct sun, do their job well, but the room still becomes a slow oven. The smell of hot wax from the occasional candle mingles with the ever-present scent of vellum and ink, creating a sleepy, steady aroma. Your will habit feels heavy and suffocating. This is the time of day when focus is hardest to maintain. Your mind drifts. Your eyes, tired from the detailed work, begin to wander from the page, and you start to notice something you hadn't paid much attention to before. The light itself. It enters the Scriptorium through the tall, narrow, arched windows on the eastern wall. In the early morning, it's a cool, white, energizing light that illuminates your desk perfectly. But as the sun climbs higher, the direct light moves away, leaving the room in a state of consistent, diffuse, northern-style light, the ideal condition for painting and illumination, preventing glare and keeping colors true. Then, in the late afternoon, the sun begins its descent on the western side of the monastery. Now, the light ray enters the Scriptorium, but this time through the stained glass windows of the adjoining chapel, which are visible from a particular angle in the room. The light is no longer white. It is transformed. It streams through the window depicting St. Michael slaying the dragon. And a long, rectangular patch of brilliant ruby red light falls onto the pale stone floor. You watch, mesmerized, as this patch of colored light begins its slow journey across the room. It moves with the imperceptible pace of a clock's hand. It creeps from the floor up onto the leg of a desk. It slides across the dark wood, making it glow. It touches the brown robe of a fellow scribe, turning the dull wool into a cloth of regal crimson for a fleeting moment. Then it continues its silent, inexorable path. An hour later, the sun has shifted, and the light is now streaming through a different pane of glass, and the patch of light on the floor has turned to deeps a fire blue. You are witnessing a sundial of immense and accidental beauty. The entire Scriptorium has become a timepiece, marking the slow, sacred passage of the day not with numbers, but with shifting pools of colored light. This daily dance of light was a fundamental, unremarked upon part of the medieval sensory world. In an era without electric lights, the quality, color, and direction of sunlight shaped the rhythm of every single day. The work of the Scriptorium was utterly dependent on it. On dark, overcast winter days, work would slow or even stop entirely. The use of candles was strictly limited, as the open flame posed a constant, terrifying risk to the priceless, flammable manuscripts. This dependence on natural light led to some clever architectural designs. Many scriptoria were built with a northern exposure to get that steady, indirect light. Some Cistercian monasteries even had a warming room with a fireplace, which was the only heated room in the entire complex besides the kitchen. And scribes could occasionally go there in winter to warm their numb fingers. It's a quaint and humanizing detail. These holy men, engaged in a sacred task, still had to deal with the simple, miserable reality of being cold. As you watch the light move, you realize how it affects the work. When the ruby light passes over your vellum page, it warms the creamy white and makes your black ink seem deeper, richer. When the blue light touches it, the page becomes cooler, more celestial. The page is not a static object. It is a landscape that changes with the light of the day. This leads to a fascinating and still debated question among art historians. Did illuminators account for this? Did a master illuminator, when choosing his pigments, consider the type of light the book would be reading? It's a tantalizing theory. Perhaps a book destined for a dark, candle-lit royal chapel would be illuminated with more gold leaf and brighter, more reflective pigments to catch the flickering light. A book for scholarly use, in a well-lit scriptorium, might use a more subtle, not better. This idea, sometimes called the reception aesthetics of manuscripts, suggests that the artists were highly aware of the environment in which their work would be seen, proving it is difficult, as we can rarely reconstruct the exact lighting conditions of a medieval room. But it opens up a whole new way of looking at these objects, not as isolated artworks, but as pieces of a larger sensory and architectural experience. The patch of blue light finally fades from the floor as the sun sinks below the horizon. The armorius moves through the room, lighting a few precious candles. The space is transformed again, thrown into a world of deep shadows and warm, flickering islands of light. The details of your illumination are harder to see now, the colors less certain. The day's work is over. The light has abandoned you. You put away your tools, your mind still full of the slow, silent precision of color. You have learned another quiet lesson of the Scriptorium. You are not just a maker of things. You are an observer of time. You have learned to read the story told not just by the words on the page, but by the light that falls upon it. In the profound, enforced silence of the Scriptorium, your sense of hearing begins to change. You filter out the expected sounds, the scratching of quills, the rustle of vellum, and start to notice a sound that isn't really there. It's a low, continuous, almost subliminal hum. It's not a physical vibration. It's the sound of silent reading. You look around the room. Brother Ansel, a notoriously devout monk, is copying the Gospels. His lips are moving, but no sound is coming out. He is forming the shape of each Latin word as his eyes pass over it. Next to him, the old master illuminator is studying a text, and you can see the faint, rhythmic pulse in his throat, as if he were humming the words deep in his chest. The air itself feels thick with this unvocalized speech, a chorus of minds all focused on the same sacred texts. This is a window into a completely different world of reading. For you, reading is likely a silent, internal, purely mental activity. In the Middle Ages, that was a rare and remarkable skill. The standard practice, for centuries, was to read aloud, or at least to murmur the words. This practice, known as lectio divina or divine reading, was not for information retrieval. It was a holistic, meditative exercise. The idea was to engage the whole body in the act of reading, the eyes to see the words, the lips to form them, the ears to hear them even if murmured, and the mind to contemplate their meaning. Reading was a physical, prayerful act. The story of St. Augustine in the 4th century seeing his master, Ambrose, reading silently to himself is famous for a reason. Augustine was utterly astonished. He wrote about it with a sense of wonder. When he read, his eyes scanned the page and his heart sought out the meaning. But his voice was silent and his tongue was still. We concluded that he wished to avoid being interrupted. The fact that this was so noteworthy tells you how uncommon silent reading was. So, the silence of your scriptorium is, in many ways, an artificial construct. It's a rule of discipline imposed over a natural tendency to vocalize. The air is filled with the ghosts of spoken words, the mental effort of dozens of monks holding the sounds in. You can almost feel it as a low-frequency hum. The collective brain power of the room made manifest. You try it yourself. As you copy a line of text, you begin to form the words with your lips, silently. Dominus regat me, that nihil me dirt. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. You feel a difference immediately. The words have more weight, more presence. The act of physically forming them, even without sound, seems to etch them more deeply into your memory. It slows you down, forcing a deeper, more deliberate engagement with the text. A quirky, related phenomenon is the use of reading fingers. You see the old Amarius doing it. As he proofreads a page, he doesn't just scan it with his eyes. His index finger moves along under the line of text, guiding his gaze. It's a practice many children learn and are later told to stop. But in the medieval world, it was standard. It was another way of physically connecting with the text, of grounding the act of reading in the body. This leads to a fascinating debate among cognitive historians and linguists. When and why did silent reading become the norm? There's no single answer. The development of word separation in Carolingian minuscule, the script you use every day, certainly helped. It made texts easier to parse visually, without needing to sound them out. The rise of universities in the 12th and 13th centuries, with their large libraries and emphasis on scholastic debate, also played a huge role. Scholars needed to read and cross-reference many books quickly, a task much better suited to silent, rapid scanning than to slow, vocalized reading. The printing press later solidified this trend, making books cheaper and more widely available for private, individual reading. The transition was slow, and the old ways died hard. There are accounts of university students in the later Middle Ages still murmuring their texts in the library, to the annoyance of others who were trying to read in the new, silent version. The Scriptorium you are in is a snapshot of this long transition, a place where the ancient tradition of vocalized reading is being suppressed by a monastic rule of silence, creating this strange, hybrid state of mental murmuring. You look back at your work, at the words you are copying. You realize they were never intended to live only on the page. They were designed to be spoken, to be chanted, to be sung in the choir, to be recited in prayer. The page is not their final destination. It is a holding place, a kind of musical score for the voice. The afternoon light begins to fade. The mental hum in the room seems to quiet down as minds grow tired. The vespers bell will ring soon, calling you all to the chapel for evening prayer. There, the words you have been silently copying all day will be released. They will fill the stone chapel with actual, resonant sound in the form of sung chants. The silence of the scriptorium and the sound of the chapel are two sides of the same coin. One is the careful containment of the word. The other is its glorious, vocal release. You understand now that the silence you work in is not an emptiness. It is a state of immense, compressed potential, waiting for the moment of its utterance. The rhythm of your life in the scriptorium has become a familiar, comforting metronome, the pre-dawn bell, the cool stone, the scratch of the quill, the slow dance of light. You have become proficient, confident, perhaps a little too confident. It happens on an otherwise unremarkable Tuesday afternoon. The air is warm and still. The low, meditative hum of the room is at its peak. You are ruling a new sheet of vellum, preparing it for a first chapter. Your inkhorn, a beautifully polished gal's horn with a stable, wide base, sits on the upper corner of your slanted desk. You reach for your straight edge. You are moving in a practiced, unthinking arc you've made 1,000 times before. But today, the corner of your heavy wool habit catches on the corner of the straight edge. The ruler pivots. It swings around and clips the base of the inkhorn. Time seems to slow down. You watch, in a state of disconnected, silent horror, as the inkhorn wobbles, For a heart-stopping second, it seems to right itself. Then, with a slow, deliberate finality, it tips over. A thick, black wave of iron Gall ink cascades down the pristine, creamy surface of your newly prepared vellum sheet. It's not a drip. It's not a splash. It's a deluge. An absolute, page-destroying flood. The ink pools on the slanted desk before pouring over the edge and onto the stone floor in a dark, accusing puddle. Silence. The gentle, rhythmic scratching of 24 quills stops instantly. The entire room freezes. This is not the minor inconvenience of a drop tool. This is the ultimate catastrophe. A full horn of precious, laboriously made ink, wasted. A perfect, expensive sheet of vellum, utterly and irrevocably ruined. Your heart is hammering against your ribs so hard you feel it in your throat. Your face is burning with a heat that has nothing to do with the summer afternoon. You want the stone floor to open up and swallow you. You don't dare to look up, but you can feel the eyes of every other monk on you. It's not a look of anger, but of something far worse. A deep, profound, pitying sympathy. Every single one of them has had this nightmare. Today, it's yours. Diomarius is there. Of course, he is. He moves with his usual unhurried grace. He looks at the black, tragic mess on your desk. He looks at the puddle on the floor. He looks at your face, which you are sure is a study in abject misery. He does not speak. He does not scold. He simply places a hand on your shoulder for a moment, a gesture of silent acknowledgement. Then he walks away. A few moments later, a young novice appears with a bucket of water and the dragon begins, silently, to clean the floor. Another novice carefully removes the soap, dripping sheet of vellum from your desk, holding it like a dead thing. You are left alone at your desk, empty-handed, staring at the dark stain on the wood where your masterpiece should have been. The shame is a physical weight. You have been clumsy. You have been wasteful. You have failed in your duty. This is the dark side of the craftsman's spirit. The immense satisfaction of creation is matched by the soul-crushing despair of destruction. The value of the materials, the vellum from a cat, the ink from the oak galls, the time, the focus, makes the loss catastrophic. A strange but true detail from the history of Scriptoria is that some monasteries had specific rules for this exact event. The Customs of Cluny, a famous monastic rulebook, specifies that a scribe who has a great spilling of his inkhorn must make a public confession of his fault before the entire chapter. While your monastery might not be so formal, the feeling of public failure is the same. The other scribes, after a moment, slowly return to their work. The gentle scratching resumes, a little more tentatively this time. It's a quiet act of grace, an attempt to restore normalcy and allow you to sit with your shame in private. But did these accidents always result in a ruined page? Herein lies a debate. While a massive spill like yours was likely a total loss, some historians argue that scribes had methods for salvaging less catastrophic ink stains. One theorized method involves using milk. Soaking the stained vellum in milk was believed to sometimes lift the ink particles as the milk curdled and was scraped away. Another possibility was to use a mixture of oat or bean flour, which would be rubbed on the stain to absorb the ink. The effectiveness of these methods is highly questionable on the topic of experimental archaeology today, with conservators trying to replicate them. For the most part, prevention was a far better strategy than a cure. This is why inkhorns were designed with wide, flat bottoms to be as stable as possible. An hour passes. It is the longest hour of your life. Finally, the Almarius returns. He says nothing. He simply places a new, clean, perfect sheet of vellum on your desk. Then he places a newly filled inkhorn beside it. He looks you in the eye and gives a single, sharp nod. The message isn't spoken but crystal clear. The failure is in the past. The work is in the present. Begin again. With a hand that is visibly trembling, you pick up your ruler. You take a breath. You begin the slow, careful process of pricking the margins and ruling the lines. Your movements are now hyper-aware, precise, and stripped of all their previous, careless confidence. You have learned the most important lesson of the Scriptorium, a lesson that can't be taught with words, only with the visceral, sickening feeling of a tipped-over ink pot. The lesson is humility, and the only antidote to failure is to pick up your tools and start the next line. After the humiliation of the great ink spill, you find yourself paying more attention to the margins of the manuscripts you study. Before, you saw them as just empty space, a frame for the sacred text. Now, you see them as a place of refuge, a zone of possibility outside the rigid, ruled lines of the main text block. And as you look closer, you discover you are not the first to have this thought. The margins are not empty. They are teeming with a secret, subversive, and often bizarre life of their own. You are studying a master copy of a book of Psalms, a serious and holy text. But down in the bottom margin, in the space known as the BAS deep page bottom of the page, you see a tiny, exquisite drawing that has absolutely nothing to do with the psalm above it. It depicts a knight in full armor, brandishing a sword and shield, locked in mortal combat with a giant snail. You blink, thinking your eyes are playing tricks on you, but it's undeniably there. The knight looks terrified, the snail menacingly determined. You flip to another page. In the margin, a rabbit is depicted wearing a monk's habit and solemnly preaching to a congregation of other rabbits. On another, a woman is shown collecting eggs from a chicken that has the head of a man. On another, a monkey is playing the bagpipes. This is the wild, weird world of medieval marginalia. These whimsical, often surreal, and sometimes crude doodles are a constant source of delight and bafflement for modern scholars. They are found in the most serious of books, Bibles, Psalters, books of hours, right alongside solemn prayers and illuminations of saints. What on earth were they for? This is one of the great unsolved mysteries of manuscript studies, and historians have been arguing about it for decades. There is no single, easy answer. One theory is that they were simple doodles, the result of a bored scribe letting his mind wander. After hours of concentrating on the dense, repetitive text, the margin was a place to let off steam, to draw something funny or strange to break the monotony. It was the medieval equivalent of doodling in your notebook during a long lecture. Another theory suggests they were a form of commentary, often satirical or moralizing. The image of the rabbit monk might be a jab at a long-winded or foolish preacher. The world upside-down imagery, like a cart pushing a horse or a fish flying in the sky, was a common medieval trope used to comment on the folly and absurdity of the human world compared to the divine order. The knight fighting a snail is a particularly persistent puzzle. Some scholars think the snail, with its shell, represented the Lombards, a group of bankers and moneylenders who were widely disliked and considered cowardly for hiding in their shells of usury. So the noble knight fighting a snail could be a satirical takedown of a perceived social enemy. It's a compelling, if undroughtable, theory. A third idea is that they were practice sketches. An apprentice illuminator might use the blank space in the margin to try out a new technique or to sketch a figure before committing it to a major illumination. This would explain some of the more unfinished-looking drawings. A particularly fun and quirky detail is the drollery. A hybrid creature. You see them everywhere in the margins. A man with the head of a fish, a bird with the body of a snake, a dog wearing a bishop's mitre. These fantastical beasts seem to spring from the same imaginative well as the gargoyles on a cathedral. They represent a fascination with the monstrous, the grotesque, and the chaotic forces that exist just at the edge of the ordered, civilized world. You start to see the margins as a silent conversation happening across generations. A scribe in the 13th century might draw a funny little man in the margin. 100 years later, another monk reading the same book might add a speech bubble coming from the man's mouth, or draw another figure arguing with him. The book becomes a living document, a canvas for centuries of silent commentary and graffiti. You even find evidence of the scribe's own lives. In the margin of one book, a scribe drew a tiny, detailed picture of a cat, and next to it, wrote a small poem in Old Irish about his cat, Tingerburn, who hunts mice while he, the scholar, hunts words. It's a breathtakingly intimate and relatable glimpse into the past, a moment of shared experience with a man who lived and worked in a room just like this one. 1,000 years ago, the existence of marginalia complicates the picture of the silent, humble, egoless scribe, while the main text was an act of faithful, anonymous reproduction. The margin was a space for individuality, for humor, for complaint, and for artistic freedom. It was a place where the scribe could be himself. Was this tolerated? This is the point of contention. Some monastic orders strictly forbade any additions to the sacred text. In these monasteries, marginalia is rare. In others, particularly those with a more secular or university connection, it seems to have been not only tolerated but even encouraged as a sign of a lively and engaged mind. The line between pious decoration and blasphemous graffiti was likely a blurry one, depending entirely on the temperament of the abbot or the armarius. You look down at the page you are working on, with its clean, empty margins. The temptation is immense. You imagine drawing a tiny, grumpy-looking bird in the corner, a silent commentary on the long, tedious passage you are copying. You don't, of course. You are still an apprentice, and the memory of the spilled ink is too fresh. But you will never look at a blank margin the same way again. It is not an absence. It is an invitation. It is the place where the official, solemn story of the book ends, and the secret, human story begins. The seasons have turned again. The last of the summer heat has given way to the crisp, cool air of autumn. The leaves on the trees in the cloistered garth have turned to golden rust, mirroring the illuminations you now create with practiced ease. You have settled into the rhythm of monastic life, the predictable cycle of prayer and work, a comforting anchor in your daily existence. But as you sit in the Scriptorium, copying a passage from the epistles of Peter, a single line of text seems to lift itself from the page and snag in your mind. It's a familiar passage, one you've read and heard many times before, but today, for some reason, it strikes you differently. You are copying the phrase, Semper parodiat satisfactionem omnipos, senti vos rationem dieque in vobis estis p. Be ready always to give an answer to every man that asketh your reason for the hope that is in you. A question, small and quiet as a mouse, scurries into the clean, well-ordered chamber of your mind. It's not a question about the text itself, but about its implications. The passage speaks of a hope that is rational, a faith that can be explained and defended. But what if a question is asked that you cannot answer? What if the reason is not sufficient? You push the thought away. It feels dangerous. It's a flicker of doubt, a crack in the smooth, solid edifice of your faith. In this world, faith is not a matter of personal opinion. It is the fundamental, unquestionable truth that structures all of reality. To question it is not intellectual curiosity. It is a step towards the abyss. It is a temptation from the devil. A whisper of pride. You try to focus on the shape of the letters, to return to the meditative state of pure transcription. But the thought remains, a persistent, buzzing fly in the quiet room of your soul. You look around at the other monks, their heads bowed in serene concentration. Do they ever have such thoughts? Does the pious brother Anselm, his lips moving in constant, silent prayer, ever feel a flicker of uncertainty? Does the short-tempered brother Michael, whose frustration with his own fallibility is so potent, ever get frustrated with the seeming contradictions in a sacred text? You would never dare to ask. To voice such a thought would be a confession of a spiritual sickness. Silence, which has been your discipline and your comfort, now becomes a cage, isolating you with this unwelcome, heretical idea. This internal struggle was the hidden, personal drama of many intelligent and devout medieval minds. The official histories, written by the Church, for the Church, present a story of monolithic, untroubled faith, but the reality, as gleaned from more personal writings, theological disputes, and heresy trial records, was far more complex. The medieval period was not an age of blind faith, but an age of intense, often agonizing, intellectual struggle to reconcile faith with reason. Think of Peter Abelard, the brilliant 12th century philosopher whose motto was, By doubting we are led to question, then by questioning we arrive at the truth. His approach, which applied logic to the mysteries of faith, was electrifying to his students, but deeply threatening to conservative theologians like Bernard of Clairvaux, who saw him as arrogant and dangerous. Their famous clash was, in essence, a battle over the legitimacy of this very kind of questioning. A quirky, lesser-known example of this tension can be found in the scribal errors themselves. While most errors are simple mistakes, some seem intentional. This is a highly controversial theory among paleographers, but it's a fascinating one. A scribe copying a passage that he finds theologically difficult might, perhaps unconsciously, alter a word or a phrase to make it more palatable, to smooth over a perceived contradiction. Or, in a very rare and brave act of defiance, a scribe with unorthodox beliefs might subtly change a text to better reflect his own views. Proving such intent is nearly impossible. A changed word could be a simple mistake, a regional dialectical difference, or a deliberate act of theological dissent. This ambiguity makes the study of textual variants a thrilling form of historical detective work. As you sit with your unsettling thought, you remember a story you overheard from a visiting monk, a story about the Cathars in the south of France. They were Christians, but their beliefs were starkly different. They believed the material world, the world of the body and the earth, was an evil creation of a lesser god, and that the true God was a being of pure spirit. For them, the God of the Old Testament, who was often wrathful and demanded sacrifice, was this evil demiurge. The church had condemned them as heretics and crushed them with a brutal crusade. Your thought is nowhere near as radical as Catharism. It is a tiny, fleeting question, but it feels like it comes from the same dark place. The fear is not just of eternal damnation for your lack of faith. It's a more immediate, social fear. The monastery is your entire world. It is your home, your family, your work, your purpose. To be cast out from it for holding a dangerous thought is a terrifying prospect. You look down at the page. The ink on your quill has dried. You have been sitting, frozen, for several minutes. You dip the quill again, the familiar motion a small comfort. You force your hand to move, to form the next letter, and the next. You retreat back into the physical act of writing, using the repetitive, mindless motion as a shield against the chaos of your own mind. You finish the line, and the page, and the chapter, but something inside you has shifted. The serene, simple certainty of your world has been complicated. You have learned that the Scriptorium, a place designed to preserve a single, unified truth, can also be the very place where the seeds of doubt are sown. One troubling, beautiful, and eternal question at a time. The final page of the Psalter lies finished on your desk. For months, you have lived inside this book, copying its text, illuminating its initials, breathing its words. Now, it is complete, but it is not yet a book. It is a collection of loose, folded sheets of vellum, a pile of unbound potential. Your journey through the Scriptorium is entering its final stage, the bindery. The bindery is not a separate room, but another specialized corner of the monastery's workshops, adjacent to the Scriptorium. It smells different again. The mineral scent of pigments is replaced by the rich, deep aroma of tanned leather, the sharp tang of bookbinder's paste, and the clean, woody scent of sawdust. Here, the delicate, intellectual work of the scribe gives way to a more robust, physical craft. The first step is to assemble the pages. You have been writing on large sheets of vellum, which have been folded once to create a leaf folio. Several of these folded sheets are nested one inside the other to create a small booklet of 8 or 10 leaves. This is called a quire or a gathering. You carefully stack these quires in the correct order, checking the small signatures, a letter or number written at the bottom of the first page of each quire, to ensure the psalms follow in their proper sequence. Now, the book must be sewn. You are shown a large, sturdy wooden frame. It looks a bit like a small loom. This is a sewing frame. 2 or more strung cords, often made of hemp or leather, are stretched vertically on the frame. These will form the spine of the book. You take the first quire, open it to the center fold, and place it against the cords. Using a long, thick needle and heavy linen thread, you begin to sew. You pass the needle through the center fold from the inside, loop it around the first cord, bring it back inside the quire, and carry it along to the next cord. It's a strong, steady, looping stitch that firmly attaches the center of the quire to the spinal cords. When you reach the end, you pick up the second quire, place it on top of the first, and continue sewing in the opposite direction, linking the quires together with a special kettle stitch at the head and tail of the book. It's slow, repetitive, and deeply satisfying work. You are literally stitching the story together. With each pass of the needle, the loose pile of pages becomes more unified, more solid. You are giving the text a body, a physical structure that will hold it together for centuries. This process of sewing onto raised cords is a hallmark of high-quality medieval binding. Sheba, quicker books might be sewn without a frame, but this robust method created the strong, flexible spine and the characteristic raised bands you see on the outside of old leather-bound books. A quirky detail that book historians love is looking for the sewer's pricking marks. Before sewing, the binder would often use a template and an AWL to prick a series of small holes along the center fold of each quire to guide the needle. Sometimes these holes are messy and irregular, the sign of a rushed job. Other times they are perfectly spaced and barely visible, a mark of a master craftsman. These tiny, functional holes are another part of the book's secret history, a testament to the unseen labor that went into its creation. Once all the quires are sewn together, you have what is called a textbook. It's a floppy, solid mass of vellum. You take it from the sewing frame, and the loose ends of the sewing cords are frayed out. These cords are essential for the next step. The covers of a medieval book were not made of flimsy cardboard. They were made of wood, usually oak or beech, about 1/4 of an inch thick. An older lay brother, a carpenter, has already cut the wooden boards to the exact size of your textbook. Your job is to attach them. You carve small channels and tunnels into the edge of the wooden boards. Then, you thread the frayed ends of the sewing cords into these channels, gluing them securely in place. The textbook is now physically integrated with its wooden covers. The book has its bones, but how did they ensure the book stayed shut? Vellum has a persistent memory. It wants to curl back to its original animal hide shape, especially in changing humidity. If left on its own, the book would spring open. This is a point of constant debate. How were books stored to prevent this? The common image is of books chained to shelves, which certainly existed in libraries to prevent theft. But for personal books, the solution was simpler and built into the binding itself. You learned that part later. For now, you hold the object in your hands. It has heft. It has solidity. The loose, fluttering pages have been tamed and unified into a single, cohesive whole. It is a long way from the stinking lime pits where the animal hides were first prepared. It has passed through the hands of the parchmenter, the scribe, the illuminator, and now the binder. It is the product of a dozen different crafts, a whole community of silent, focused labor. The soul of the book, its words and images, now has a body to protect it. It is ready for its skin. The book sits on your workbench, a solid block of vellum pages sewn tightly between 2 row boards. It has bones, but it lacks skin. The final stage of its physical creation is to cover it in leather, transforming it from a raw, functional object into a thing of finished, tactile beauty. The air in the bindery is rich with the smell of tin hide. The master binder lays out a large piece of leather on a table. It's probably deerskin or pigskin, treated with tannins from oak bark that have turned it into a durable, flexible material. He runs his hand over the surface, feeling for imperfections. He chooses a section with a smooth, even grain and cuts a rectangle, large enough to wrap around the entire book. Both covers in the spine, with plenty of excess to fold over the edges. Next comes the adhesive. You might think of glue as something that comes from a bottle, but here, it's a craft in itself. The binder has a pot warming gently over a small brazier. It contains bookbinder's paste, a thick, sticky concoction he made himself. The recipe was a closely guarded secret of the guild, but it was typically a simple mixture of wheat starch or flour, boiled with water until it formed a thick, translucent gel. It was strong, reversible with moisture, and, importantly, archival. It wouldn't damage the vellum or leather over time. He paints a generous, even layer of the warm, gooey paste onto the wooden boards and the spine of the book. Then, with a practiced, confident movement, he lays the leather over it. This is the crucial moment. He works quickly, smoothing the leather down, pushing out any air bubbles, ensuring a perfect, seamless adhesion. The leather must be molded to the shape of the book. He pays special attention to the spine, pressing the damp leather down firmly against the raised bands created by the sewing cords, making them stand out in sharp relief. Now for the corners. He makes a series of neat, diagonal cuts in the excess leather at the corners of the boards. This allows him to fold the leather over the edges of the wood, the turn-ins, without creating a clumsy, bulky lump. He pastes the turn-ins down on the inside of the boards, creating a clean, finished edge. The raw wood is now completely encased in a protective, beautiful skin, while the leather is still damp and pliable. The book might be decorated. This is called tooling. For a simple book, this might be all it gets. But for a more important volume, the cover itself becomes a canvas. The binder uses small, heated metal stamps, tools, each carved with a specific design. A rosette, a fleur-de-lis, a tiny animal. He presses the hot tool into the damp leather, leaving a dark, permanent, burnished impression. This is called blind tooling because no color is added. By combining these small stamps and repeating patterns, he can create incredibly intricate, geometric designs that cover the entire surface of the book. A fascinating piece of trivia for book historians is that these small decorative tools were unique to each bindery. By identifying the specific set of tools used on a cover, a specialist can often trace an unauthored, unsigned book back to the exact workshop, and even the city where it was bound. The tools are the binder's fingerprint. But what about more lavish decorations? For a truly luxurious book, commissioned by a king or a high-ranking bishop, the leather cover was just the beginning. This is where the goldsmiths and jewelers would take over. The wooden boards would be covered not just with leather, but with carved ivory panels, intricate silver or gold filigree, and even inset with precious gems, sapphires, rubies, and pearls. These treasure bindings transform the book from a tool for reading into a sacred relic and a symbol of immense wealth and power. They are less a book and more a piece of jewelry designed to hold a book. The question of how much decoration was appropriate was, of course, a matter of theological debate. A devout, austere Cistercian monk would have been horrified by a gem-encrusted gospel, seeing it as a sinful display of worldly vanity. For him, a simple and decorated leather binding was the most honest and holy choice. But for a powerful abbot like Sugar of St. Denis, who famously rebuilt his abbey church in the new Gothic style, beauty was a pathway to God. He believed that adorning sacred objects with gold and jewels helped elevate the soul, allowing the worshipper to contemplate the divine, heavenly Jerusalem. The book cover itself became a theological statement. Your psalter is not destined for such grandeur. It is a working book, a book for the choir. You watch as the master binder uses a few simple tools to press a modest, handsome cross into the center of the front cover. The book is now covered and sealed. It lies on the bench, the damp leather slowly drying, the paste setting. It looks, finally, like a book. It has the familiar form, the satisfying heft, the leathery smell of a library. The journey from a living animal to this finished, sacred object is complete. It has been a process of transformation, of death and rebirth, of raw materials made holy through countless hours of silent, focused, human labor. The book is almost finished. It lies on the workbench, handsome in its new, dark leather skin. The tooling has dried, leaving a subtle, elegant cross on the cover. But there is one final, crucial component to add. It's the part that will give the book its final, satisfying sense of closure and protect its pages for centuries to come. You are going to attach the clasps. The master binder brings you to yet another workshop, this one ringing with the sharp, rhythmic sound of a hammer on metal. This is the domain of the blacksmith and the metalworker. The air is hot and smells of coal, smoke, and hot iron. It's a stark contrast to the quiet, organic world of the Scriptorium and bindery. Here, you will fashion the hardware that will seal your book. On a workbench, there are sheets of brass and bronze, along with various tools, shears for cutting, files for shaping, and small drills. The master binder hands you a long, thin strip of bronze. Your first task is to cut it into for equal lengths. These will form the straps for the clasps. Using a heavy pair of metal shears, you put your weight into it, and with a loud snick, the metal gives way. Next, you must shape them. Using a file, you round the edges and smooth away any burrs from the cut. It's noisy, dusty work. You file one end of each strap into a gentle point. The other end, the one that will attach to the book, you leave flat. Now for the catch, the part on the front cover that the strap will hook onto. This is usually a simple pin or a small, mushroom-shaped stud. The blacksmith has already forged a handful of these small brass pins. Your job is to drill the holes to attach them. You place the flat end of the leather strap over the back cover of the book, about a third of the way in from the foredge. You mark the positions for 2 small holes. Then you take a hand drill, a simple tool with a wooden handle that you crank, and you carefully drill through the leather and into the thick oak board beneath. It's slow going, the drill bit biting into the tough wood. This is a key detail that explains why clasps were so common. As you know, vellum wants to warp and curl. The clasps were not just decorative, they were a functional necessity. They held the book under constant, gentle pressure, keeping the vellum pages flat and preventing dust and moisture from getting in. This is why books on a shelf were often stored with the foredge facing out, not the spine, so the clasps were visible and accessible. You secure the bronze straps to the back cover with small brass nails, hammering them firmly into the pre-drilled holes. The straps now extend from the back cover, long metal tongues ready to hold the book shut. On the front cover, you drill corresponding holes and hammer in the small brass catch pins. You close the book. You fold the first bronze strap over the foredge. It hooks onto the pin with a satisfying, solid click. You fasten the second one. Click. The book is now locked. It feels completely different. It is no longer just a book. It is a container, a treasure chest for words. The clasps give it a sense of importance, of privacy, of security. To open it now requires a deliberate, physical act. But work lasts always this simple. Not at all. This is another area where bookbinders and patrons could show off. For high-status books, the clasps and corner pieces metal protectors for the corners of the boards could be incredibly ornate. They might be made of silver, engraved with intricate patterns, or even feature small enamel inlays. Sometimes the strap ends were fashioned into fantastic shapes, like the head of a dragon or a lion. The design of the metalwork is another clue that helps historians date and place a manuscript. A certain style of clasp might be characteristic of a 15th century German bindery, while another might scream 14th century Parisian. The debate over form versus function is alive here, too. Some scholars argue that the primary purpose was always functional, to keep the book shut. Others point to the immense artistry and expense of some metalwork and argue that it was clearly a status symbol, a way of signaling the value of the book's contents and the wealth of its owner. As with most things, the truth is likely a combination of both. They were functional, yes, but that function could be expressed with beautiful, symbolic artistry. A quirky and fun fact is that the orientation of the clasp can sometimes tell you where a book was made. English bookbinders typically attach the straps to the front cover, closing towards the back. German and Dutch binders usually did the opposite, attaching the straps to the back cover and closing towards the front, as you have just done. It's a small, nerdy detail, but it's the kind of thing that makes a book historian's heart beat a little faster. You run your finger over the quill. Smooth bronze of the clasp you just attached. You have worked with skin, with ink, with stone, with gold, and now with metal. You have followed the entire ecosystem of crafts that culminates in this single, finished object. The book is sealed. Its long, slow birth is over. It is ready to be presented, to be judged, and to begin its own life, its own journey out into the world. The day has come. This altar, the product of a full year of your life, is finished. It rests on a clean cloth on your desk, the dark leather gleaming, its bronze clasps securely fastened. It is no longer just your work. It has become an object in its own right, separate from you, with its own presence and a profound, satisfying weight. You have been summoned. The Almarius, with a rare, almost gentle expression, beckons you to follow him. You lift the heavy book from the desk. Your hands are sweating slightly. You carry it with both hands, like a secret offering, through the Scriptorium, past the other monks who pause their work to watch you go. Their silent gazes are a mixture of curiosity and respect. They know this moment. You follow the Almarius out of the cloister and towards the main building of the monastery, to a door you have never entered. This is the abbot's study. The abbot is the spiritual father of the monastery, a man of immense authority and, in this case, a renowned scholar. His judgment is the final one. The room is small, but unlike the stark, functional Scriptorium, it is filled with a sense of quiet, learned comfort. A fire crackles in a small stone fireplace, an unheard of luxury. The walls are lined not with bare stone, but with wooden shelves holding a dozen or so other books. A veritable treasure trove of knowledge. The air smells of wood smoke, old leather, and beeswax polish. The abbot, a man with a kind, wrinkled face and eyes that seem to see right through you, is sitting at a large wooden table. He looks up as you enter and gives you a small, encouraging smile. He gestures for you to place the book on the table before him. You do so, your hands trembling slightly as you set it down. The sound of the heavy book meeting the wood is a soft, definitive thud. The abbot does not speak. He simply looks at the book for a long moment, taking in its form. He runs a hand over the smooth leather of the cover, his fingers tracing the shape of the blind-tooled cross. Then, with a slow, deliberate movement, he unfastens the two bronze clasps. The click-click of the metal is the only sound in the room. He opens the book. He doesn't flip through it. He examines it page by page, with an unhurried, systematic attention to detail that makes your heart pound. He looks at the quality of the vellum, the consistency of the ruling. He scrutinizes your script, his eyes moving along the lines of black text, judging the uniformity of your letters, the evenness of your spacing. You feel as though your very soul is being examined. He pauses on a page with one of your major illuminations, the Historia Ted initial B for the Psalm Beatus VI hour. He leans in closer, his old eyes examining the fine lines of the drawing, the vibrant, layered colors, the gleam of the burnished gold. He holds the page at an angle to the light, watching how the gold flashes. This was the moment of truth for a scribe and illuminator. The approval of the patron, be it an abbot, a bishop, or a king, was everything. A major commission, like a grand Bible or a book of hours for a noble lady, was a huge investment for the monastery. The final product had to be perfect, a testament to the skill of its craftsmen and the glory of God. A fascinating detail from this process is the presentation miniature. In some very high-end manuscripts, the very first page would be a full-page illustration depicting the scribe or the abbot himself presenting the finished book to the patron. It was a kind of visual receipt, a painted record of this very moment of handover and approval. It was also a rare opportunity for the otherwise anonymous craftsman to depict himself, albeit in a posture of humble offering. The abbot turns a few more pages, his expression unreadable. Did he see the spot where you had to scrape away a blot of ink? Did he notice the slight waver in the stem of that P? Did he think your ultramarine blue was ground finely enough? Every tiny flaw you are aware of screams out at you from the page. The question of what constituted good work is a source of continuous scholarly analysis. By comparing thousands of manuscripts, Historians can identify different grades of production. There were the deluxe, top-tier books for royalty, with flawless vellum, copious gold leaf, and paintings by master artists. Then there were the standard, high-quality books for church or university use, like the one you've made. And then there were the budget books, written on cheaper, drier vellum, with simpler scripts and little to no illumination, made for poor students or provincial parish priests. The quality of your psalter places it firmly in the respectable middle, a solid, handsome workhorse of a book. After what feels like an eternity, the abbot looks up from the page. He looks at the armorius, and then he looks at you. He closes the book, the sound of the cover shutting echoing in the quiet room. He fastens the clasps. Click, click, then he nods. It is a small, simple gesture, but it is everything. It is a silent acknowledgement of a year of toil, a year of discipline, a year of focus. It is the highest praise you could possibly receive. A wave of relief so profound it almost makes you dizzy washes over you. You have not failed. The work is good. The abbot says a few quiet words to the armorius, and then you are dismissed. As you walk back to the Scriptorium, the weight of the book is gone from your hands, but the weight of the abbot's approval settles in your heart. You have passed the test. You are no longer just an apprentice. You are a scribe, an illuminator, a maker of books. The psalter is no longer yours. It now belongs to the monastery, to God, and to the future. The empty space on your desk feels strange. For a year, the psalter has been the anchor of your days, its growing weight and complexity the measure of your progress. Now, it is gone, residing in the abbot's study before it begins its true life. The Scriptorium feels the same. The light still dances on the floor. The scratching of quills still provides its soft, constant rhythm, but something for you has fundamentally changed. A few days later, the armorius approaches you. He doesn't bring you a new stack of vellum or a new master text to copy. Instead, he speaks to you, his voice raspy from disuse in the silent room. He tells you the psalter has been judged a fine piece of work. So fine, in fact, that it is not destined to stay here, in the monastic choir where you had imagined it would be used. He tells you a story. A wealthy merchant from the city, a patron of the monastery, had recently lost his beloved wife. In her memory, and for the salvation of her soul, he has made a large donation to the abbey. In gratitude, the abbot has decided to gift him your psalter. It will be a tool for his private prayer, a comfort in his grief, and a symbol of the monastery's spiritual guidance. The news lands with a confusing mixture of pride and a strange, unexpected sense of loss. You had always envisioned your book being used here, its pages turned by the calloused hands of your brothers, its psalms chanted in the familiar stone chapel. Instead, it is leaving. It's going out into the world of commerce, of private wealth, of emotions you have largely left behind. This was the reality for many of the finest manuscripts produced in monasteries. While they created books for their own use, their scriptoria also functioned as commercial workshops, producing luxury goods for a wealthy lay clientele. A beautifully illuminated book of hours was the ultimate status symbol for a 15th century nobleman or a rich merchant's wife. It advertised not only their wealth, as these books could cost more than a house, but also their piety and sophistication. The monastery's Scriptorium was thus a vital source of income, connecting the secluded world of prayer with the bustling world of secular economics. You try to imagine the book's new life. It will sit not on a rough wooden lectern, but perhaps on a velvet draped table in a warm, taped-stride room. Its pages will be turned not by a monk, but by a merchant whose hands are soft from counting coins, not calloused from scraping vellum. The divine words you so carefully copied will be read in the context of personal grief and private devotion. This raises a fascinating question for historians. Did the intended destination of a book influence its creation? The evidence suggests it absolutely did. A book made for a layperson, especially a woman, would often be different from one made for a cleric. The illustrations might be more narrative and emotional. focusing on the life of Christ or the sorrows of the Virgin Mary, rather than on complex theological concepts. The script might be larger and clearer. The book might even contain personalized elements, like a portrait of the patron kneeling before a saint, or their coat of arms painted in the margin. The book he made was a standard psalter, but it's easy to see how the process could be customized. A quirky detail of this export market was the role of the professional, secular bookseller, who emerged in cities like Paris and Bruges in the later Middle Ages. These men acted as middlemen. A wealthy client would go to them, commission a book, and the bookseller would then subcontract the work. The vellum to a parchmenter, the scribing to one workshop, the illumination to a famous master artist, and the binding to another. This putting out system was a more commercial, assembly line version of what you experienced within the monastery's walls. This shift from monastic to commercial production is a key development in the history of the book. You feel a pang of jealousy. Almost. The merchant will own the book, the subject that contains a year of your life, a piece of your soul. But the Amarius, sensing your complex feelings, reminds you of the purpose of the work. The book is a vessel, he explains through quiet words and gestures. It is meant to carry the word of God out into the world, to plant seeds of faith in whatever soil it finds. Its purpose is not to remain locked away, but to be used. Its journey is part of its holiness. You accept this, and the feeling of loss slowly morphs into a quiet sense of purpose. Your silent, hidden labor in this cold stone room will now have an effect in a world you cannot see. A man you will never meet will find comfort in the words you copied. His prayers will be guided by the images you painted. You look around the Scriptorium with new eyes. You are not just making objects. You are building boats. You construct them here, in the quiet harbor of the monastery, with all the skill and devotion you can muster, and then you push them out into the vast, unpredictable ocean of the world, trusting that they will carry their precious cargo safely to a distant shore. The thought is both humbling and exhilarating. The Psalter's journey is just beginning. And now, you realize, so is yours. There is another book waiting, another boat to be built. The Psalter has been sent away, carried by a lay brother on a mule to the city, protected in a thick leather satchel. The space on your desk, and in your mind, is now a clean slate. The abbot's approval has elevated your status. You are no longer the trembling apprentice. You are a trusted craftsman, a full member of the silent, vital engine of the Scriptorium. The Amarius approaches your carrel. This time, he doesn't bring you a completed master text to copy. He brings you a stack of loose, unbound quires. The vellum is of varying quality, some sheets smooth and white, others darkened with visible flaws. The script is inconsistent, a mix of several different hands, some neat and practiced, others clumsy and uneven. It's a patchwork. He explains the task. Begin in that low, raspy voice that feels like a special occasion. Des Smo, Boo, a parish on the coast, a place of fishermen and their families, has requested a simple book of Gospels. They have no money for a new commission, but over the years, the monastery has accumulated various unfinished or slightly flawed works. A choir left over from a larger project, a section copied by a novice who later left the order, a few pages that were meant for a book whose patron died before it was finished. These are the orphan children of the Scriptorium. Your new job is not just to be a scribe, but an editor and a compiler. You are to take these disparate parts and stitch them together into a single, cohesive, functional book. It will not be a masterpiece like the Psalter. It will not have shimmering gold leaf or intricate historiette head initials. Its beauty will not be in its perfection, but in its very existence. A book for a community that would otherwise have none. You begin the work of a detective. You spread the quires out, trying to match the script styles, to figure out which scribe wrote which section. You notice the subtle differences. One scribe used a slightly different form of the letter G. Another consistently used a darker, richer ink. You are piecing together a puzzle made by anonymous hands, some of whom may have worked in this very room decades before you were born. This process of creating a composite manuscript was more common than you might think, especially for less wealthy institutions. Books were too valuable to waste any part. This is a practice that complicates life for modern manuscript scholars. They might find a book where the first half is from 13th century France and the second half is from 14th century Germany, bound together centuries later by a thrifty librarian. It makes tracing the book's provenance, its history of ownership and origin, a fascinating challenge. You encounter a problem. There is a gap in the Gospel of Luke. A whole choir is missing, right in the middle of a crucial narrative. There is no existing piece that fits. You will have to create it yourself. This is a new challenge. You are not just copying, you are matching. You must study the script of the surrounding pages, the work of a long-dead monk, and replicate it as closely as possible. You have to analyze his letter forms, his spacing, his rhythm. You must try to erase your own scribal hand and adopt his. It is an act of profound scribal empathy, a collaboration across time. You prepare a fresh sheet of vellum and begin, trying to make your work a seamless bridge between the two older sections. A strange but common feature you might find in a book like this is a palimpsest page. This is a sheet of vellum that has been used before. The original text was scraped away, and the new text written over it. You hold one such page up to the light, underneath your text of the Gospel. You can just make out the faint, ghostly letters of the previous text. It seems to be a book of Roman law. This single page is a testament to a huge shift in culture. The Christian scripture literally written over the top of the pagan, classical world. The past is not erased, just repurposed. As you work, you make decisions. A small, simple read initial eye here for the start of a chapter. A slightly larger blue one there. You have no budget for gold or complex illuminations, but you can still bring color and structure to the page using the cheaper mineral pigments. You are not just a craftsman, you are a designer, making choices to improve the reader's experience. This role of the scribe as editor is a point of some debate. Were scribes just mindless copyists, or did they have agency? The evidence from books like this suggests they often had a great deal of agency, especially when working without a wealthy patron's strict oversight. They made choices about layout, decoration, and even minor textual edits to improve the text or correct what they perceived as an error in their master copy. They were not automatons. They were active participants in the transmission of knowledge. Finally, after weeks of patient work, the Gospels are complete. The text is whole. You sew the quires together, the old and the new, and bind them in a simple, sturdy cover of plain pigskin with a single, functional clasp. It is not a work of high art. Its pages are a chorus of different voices. Its vellum a patchwork of different histories. But when you hold it, it feels just as satisfying as the glorious Psalter, if not more so. The Psalter was a monument to perfection. This book is a monument to persistence. It is a testament to the idea that nothing should be wasted, that even the flawed and forgotten pieces can be brought together to create something new and useful. It is a humble book for a humble community, and it is the most meaningful work you have ever done. The fisherman's gospel is gone, sent on its way to the coast. A new sense of quiet settles over you. It's not the anxious quiet of the apprentice, nor the focused quiet of the craftsman under pressure. It's a deeper, more settled quiet. The quiet of purpose found and fulfilled. Your desk is clear once more. The Amarius approaches, but this time he doesn't bring you a new project. He simply gestures for you to rise and follow him. You walk out of the Scriptorium, your eyes blinking in the bright afternoon sun of the cloister garden. The air is cool and smells of damp earth and late blooming roses. He leads you not to the library or the bendery, but to a small, simple stone bench in a quiet corner of the garth, overlooking a bed of medicinal herbs. He sits, and indicates for you to sit beside him. For the first time, you are sitting not as master and apprentice, but as two brothers. He begins to speak, his voice low and steady. He tells you that your time as a maker of books is, for now, complete. You have learned the crafts. You have mastered the disciplines. You have created a work of high art for a wealthy patron, and you have salvaged a humble book for a poor parish. You have experienced the pride of perfection and the humility of failure. You have felt the whisper of doubt and the quiet joy of service. The cycle, he explains, is the core of monastic life. There is a time for manual labor, for the tilling of fields. There is a time for intellectual labor, for the making of books. And there is a time for spiritual contemplation, for the quiet digestion of all that has been learned and created. Your season is turning once more. He tells you that you will be given a new role. You will spend more time in the study of the scriptures you have so faithfully copied, moving from the physical act of transcription to the deeper work of interpretation and meditation. The Lectio Divina you once only observed. Your hands will rest, and your mind will now do the labor. You look down at your own hands. The fingers are stained with ink. The knuckle of your right middle finger has a permanent, calloused bump where the quill has rested for thousands of hours. It is the permanent, physical mark of your craft, a scribe's stigma. It's a testament to the fact that this work, this silent, intellectual pursuit, was also profoundly physical. It changed your body. This physical impact on the scribe is a fascinating bit of historical reality. Scribes complained constantly in their marginal notes about their aching backs, their strained eyes, their cramped hands. The art of writing is a painful one. One scribe wrote, "It tires the eyes, crushes the ribs, and afflicts the sundry parts of the body." Their work was a form of physical penance, a slow martyrdom of the joints and spine. You think back to the very beginning of your journey, to the shocking cold of the stone floor, the intimidating silence, the terror of holding a quill for the first time. You have traveled so far since then, all without ever leaving the quiet confines of these monastery walls. You have journeyed through the entire medieval world in miniature, from the farms that provided the animals for the vellum, to the trade routes that brought the lapis lazuli from Afghanistan, to the intellectual debates that raged in the universities. The Scriptorium was not an escape from the world. It was a microcosm of it. But was this life, this cycle of silent labor, truly the norm for all time? Historians, of course, know that this world was already beginning to change. Even as you sat on this bench, a man named Gutenberg, far to the north in Germany, is experimenting with something new. Movable type in the printing press. His invention will, within a generation, shatter the silent world of the Scriptorium forever. It will democratize the book, making knowledge accessible on a scale you can't even imagine. The painstaking, year-long labor you poured into a single psalter will be replicated in an afternoon. This is the great, poignant irony that hangs over the entire history of the Scriptorium. The scribes were working at the absolute pinnacle of their craft, creating the most beautiful books the world had ever seen. At the very moment their entire way of life was about to become obsolete, their dedication to the slow, perfect, handmade word was a final, glorious sunset before the dawn of the mechanical age. But you know nothing of this. For you, this world is eternal. The bell will ring for vespers. The sun will set. Tomorrow, a new day will begin. You will not sit at the scribe's carrel, but perhaps in the library, with a book made by a brother a century ago. The cycle will continue. The armorius stands up. He places a hand on your shoulder, a gesture of quiet blessing. He leaves you there, alone on the bench. In the fading light, the air grows cooler. You look out over the quiet garden, the scent of thyme and rosemary rising to meet you. The frantic, focused energy of the last year begins to drain away, replaced by a deep, quiet calm. Your chapter in the Scriptorium is over. A new, blank page awaits, and so, the gentle rhythm of that life enfolds you. The sharp scent of ink and the mellow fragrance of old leather become the air you breathe. The soft scratch of a quill on vellum is the only music you need. The slow, patient dance of light across the stone floor becomes your clock, measuring out a life not in hours, but in prayers and pages. You feel the weight of the finished book in your hands, a solid, tangible piece of your own soul, a vessel of knowledge you have prepared for a journey you will never take. The world outside, with its noise and its haste, fades into a distant rumor. Here, in the quiet heart of the monastery, you have found your purpose, not in grand deeds or loud proclamations, but in the small, sacred, repetitive act of making a single, beautiful mark on a clean, white page. Your mind grows quiet, your breathing deepens, and the story of the scribe becomes your own. A gentle, peaceful dream to carry you into the deep, silent hours of the night.